Alexis. Hi, Susan. Hi, Susan.
Gonna be a little punchy here tonight, huh?
All right, welcome to this meeting of the Milton Planning Board. This is our 5th meeting of fiscal year 2018. And I'm Alex Whiteside, I'm the chairman. And why don't we go around this table and introduce ourselves? You can start.
Okay, Denny Swenson, member.
Cheryl Tagayas, member.
April Lamoureux, member.
Lauren Masser, Assistant Town Planner.
William Clark, Planning Director. Brian Furs, member.
Okay, now we're in order. We're going to meet again on the 28th of September and October 12th. We have some minutes, but Julie, the minutes, the changes I gave you, have you shown them to April? You've got them somewhere?
Cheryl has.
I have them.
So and we have some minutes from 2014, which got waylaid somehow. And so, what?
2014.
Oh, you mean August 14th?
No, 2014.
Oh my goodness, okay.
So the only members who are still standing from then are me and Brian. But I think that we will...
Try to remember.
I think we will, next time, we'll show them to you first. And
Good
then we're
plan.
going to ask, we're going to show them to everyone. And we're going to ask that the board approve the minutes, but we will make a notation that certain members were not members at the time of the meeting.
Very good.
But we'll do that later. Now, citizens speak.
I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
Very quickly. October 16th, that Master Plan Implementation Committee
Yeah.
meeting. Is there any need for a quorum? There's no vote that night, is there?
No, there's not a need for a quorum.
I'm going to try to make it, but I might not be able to. Okay, thank you.
But we will, the board members are excited about this. And,
Yeah, absolutely.
I am.
And we'll be there. Now, we're going to...
Where is that held? Is that here?
I don't know.
Oh, okay, to be determined.
The Implementation Committee is
I
going to...
believe it'll be here and downstairs.
It is in the schedule for the Blue Conference Room.
It might be nice to go to the Council on Aging. Give it a try. That's up to the Implementation Committee, and you also should have some refreshments. All right.
Chocolate chip if possible.
I mean, you have this big budget.
I really like
Now,
Chinese food.
Citizens speak. Anyone who wants to speak on something that's not on our agenda is welcome to do so. All right. Seeing no one, we will now take see some hands. Who's here to listen to this presentation on the East Milton building? All right, so why don't we go right to that? And here we have a lawyer who will present.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be in Portland. We have Falcone Companies. And I guess I can give a quick overview. We've spent a fair amount of time in preliminary sort of listening mode. We've presented preliminary plans to each of you individually. We've presented to each of the members of the Board of Selectmen individually. We've met with the Affordable Housing Trust. We've met with the Board of Directors of the East Milton Neighborhood Association. We've met with a couple of individual neighbors and abutters. And we know that we've been invited to a large neighborhood meeting on the 27th of this month at the East Congregational Church, and we're looking forward to that opportunity. As you know, we are proposing a fairly dramatic change. We think likely the first of many changes to East Milton Square over the next number of years. But we are, and I don't know whether this is specifically on a website available to show, but, oh, here it is, okay. So, very quickly, project area is defined by picking up. It's an area that's defined by a storefront on Adams Street, bounded on the westerly side by all of Adams Court, which is a private way that the Falcones share with the abutting property owner, Bassett Street and Franklin Street, excluding the remainder of the storefronts on Adams Street. The Falcones do not own the Abbey Park restaurant or the other storefronts. They've owned 2 single families that are in the Residence C district that are on Bassett Street for several years. They recently acquired a property that connects from Bassett Street through to Adams Street along Adams Court, and very recently demolished an old single-family dwelling that was sort of in the middle of that property. We've done that within the last couple of weeks. What's next? Anyway, we proposed to redevelop the site, taking advantage of topography. The Falcones own their own office building at 4 Franklin, and there is a surface parking lot that services that building that has a combination of the Falcone offices, a couple of dentists, a real estate office, and their current proposal is that that building will remain. There'll be no change to that building. The storefront along Adams Street, the 2-family on Bassett, and the other 2 1-families will all be demolished. The grade of Bassett Street is 10 feet below the grade of the parking lot, and so there will be a level of parking that will be at the grade of Bassett, coming all the way in and under the property to the roughly to the existing office building, but not under the existing office building. And then a replacement of the parking, the surface parking at grade. The proposal currently calls for 10,000 square feet of retail on the first floor, another 7,000 approximately of office on the second floor, and 2 levels of apartments above that portion of the building, and 4 stories of apartments above the parking lot on the Bassett Street side, sort of an L-shaped building. The 4th floor is proposed to be stepped back so that that's a view of the proposal as you enter the parking lot on Franklin Street. You can see how on the right-hand side Franklin Street dips down to the right. And then from there on the right-hand side, you've got 4 stories of apartments over parking. On the left, as you look back through the parking lot, would be first floor level of retail, perhaps office, and then second floor office. We do know that Atlantic Insurance, which is a tenant in the storefront on Adams Street, has a desire to move back into that same space once it has been rebuilt. And so that area may be, first floor may be office as opposed to retail, which is a minor modification to the requirements for parking. The current proposal calls for 117 parking spaces, looking at perhaps an additional 30 parking spaces underneath a portion of the existing parking lot. And it'll be something we'll be looking at with the town in terms of investing in some additional parking that may be made available for use uses in the district. We've heard some preliminary comments about moving the building back from the edges of the property. Currently, we're showing buildings sort of built out to edges. One of the comments that we've heard is that activate the streetscape, make it more pedestrian-friendly, and so the architects are looking at pulling it in on the three sides where there is streetscape, pulling it in on the first floor on the Adams Street side, pulling it in on the Adams Court side, and pulling it back in on Bassett Street. It'll give us some more room to do some planting and other landscape features, soften the appearance, activate the street, and make it more pedestrian, make the building more interactive with the pedestrian level. So that is one of the things that they're looking at. There are some technical construction issues that we're looking at, particularly relative to the area up against Adams Street. The need to shore up the private way and to shore the sidewalk of Adams Street and to shore the building containing the other properties will be expensive. And so we're looking at eliminating the parking underneath that area so that the nature of the excavation and the support systems there will be more efficient, less expensive. And we're adjusting a little bit the way the building lays out to account for potential loss of those parking spaces. So it's preliminary. As I said, we've had a series of initial meetings. We're looking forward to a major meeting with the neighborhood and follow up to what we understand was an interesting meeting conducted by the neighborhood last week. We were not invited. We've had some preliminary conversations with some who were there, getting a sense of what the questions that were being raised that they'll want us to address. But we look forward to that meeting, as I said, on the 27th, and from there we'll be preparing new sets of plans to come back forward to the town with in the October-November timeframe. The goal is to file for a comprehensive permit under 40B in combination with the town, the so-called friendly 40B as opposed to an unfriendly 40B, hoping that the selectmen will be co-applicants on the application for the 40B development. We think that it accounts for a number of goals from the town from the master plan perspective. Among them, obviously, new and diverse set of sort of housing, 71 units, 25% of which would be affordable, 71 units which would count on the town's subsidized housing inventory, because as rentals they would all be included on the town's subsidized housing inventory. We think the market for rentals is a combination of empty nesters, people, many of whom would be living in the broader East Milton neighborhood, who may be selling, want to stay in the area, don't need to purchase again, they want to rent. Similar to the makeup of most of the tenants at Milton Hill House, which is in my neighborhood, 66 units of rental. Most of those occupants are in these, they're not age restricted, but they're in the empty nester category. Long tenancies, average tenancies are 9 years, no children, minimal impact on traffic associated with the come and go that you get from a family perspective. The other market would be young professionals, young adults living proximate to Boston, perhaps moving back into Milton as their first place to live, and looking to be somewhat proximate to transit. There are bus lines that serve both North Quincy Station and Ashmont Station on the Red Line. We will be providing, to address parking, there is a parking study and a traffic study that are ongoing. Now we've retained Howard Stein Hudson, who is the town's consultant, to layer on top of the work that they're doing, additional impacts that might arise from this proposal, looking carefully at the parking requirements, looking carefully at the traffic mitigation measures that might be required, and we'll be participating in that. It's obviously, we think that we're preserving and enhancing East Milton's character in a way. We're blowing it up in one sense, but we are reinvesting in that neighborhood, in that commercial center. The Falcones have been active in acquiring and reactivating old properties. The Novara restaurant in particular, reactivating the old movie theater has been a significant boon to the area, a big change. There's more change coming. Falcones are facilitating some of that change. Will increase tax revenue coming out of East Milton and the like. So we think that it does a number of things in response to the town's master plan. It helps move the ball for the town towards much greater percentage of properties that are included on the state subsidizing housing inventory, and so we think on the net side that it's a positive outcome. So with that, we've got a lot more work to do. We're adjusting, we're listening, we'll be making changes. We look forward to being back with a next set of plans, and look forward to responding to as many questions as we can as we go.
Okay, now you've got a meeting, a neighborhood meeting on the 27th.
Yes.
And the neighborhood has met and has formulated some issues.
Yes.
I assume that's
We understand
the
that to be the
meeting that
case.
you were not present at. The neighborhood discussed this and formulated some issues, which they will present to you on the 27th. And I think that, and the procedure that you're suggesting is somewhat, you're going to want to get the selectman to be a co-applicant, so you're going to want to get the selectman on board with a design. And the selectmen are likely to say, I think that we would like to have the input from the planning board on site plan approval with respect to the plan before we, the selectmen, determine what to do. And once the selectmen, and if the selectmen decide that they're willing to submit the proposal with the Falcones, you would ask for a comprehensive permit from the Board of Appeals. So, and you would have a hearing there. It seems to me that the planning board has made it unmistakably clear in the past that neighborhood input is extremely important to the board. And so we're going to want to know what the input is, but I think that we can, I know that there is at least one comment which could be made at this point, and I think it probably should be, and that has to do with the architecture. And it's been suggested by Member Swenson that this needs to have a much more of a village feel. That what you've got is pretty sterile and doesn't sort of give that feeling that East Milton is a village. It's sort of a office-type building that you could find almost anywhere, and I think that you really should need to give some serious attention to trying to make something friendlier for its setting and just friendlier for the people who live near it if it were to get built. So that's, but we will hear from the board first, if they want to give some general comments. And then we'll hear from the public if they feel constrained to talk now rather than on the 27th. If there's material that should be put on the table now, fine. But this is not our last meeting on this matter. We're not determining anything tonight. And before we determine anything, we're going to want to know what the neighborhood thinks, and we're going to want to have our own input with the neighborhood input in mind.
And we
Fair
will-
enough?
That's absolutely fair. We, in fact, one of the many meetings we anticipate having would be more of a combined public meeting with this board and the Board of Selectmen to solicit comments at some point before we would begin to file on the application, and obviously to enable the selectmen in particular to hear comments from neighbors and this board and others about the proposal as it will have been modified between now and when that meeting might take place. We're thinking sometime around early to mid-November for that meeting.
So does the board have questions, comments?
I have a question for clarification and a comment. You said that you are using the town's traffic engineer, Howard Hudson. Are you using them for your traffic engineer, or are you just involving them in the discussion?
No, we're using them as our traffic engineer. We've retained the other side of the house to look at specific traffic impacts associated with this development, layering on top of traffic analysis that's being done by them for the town with respect to improvements for Adams Street, Granite Street, Granite Avenue, that corridor.
Okay, so it's just from a process standpoint, I just want the board and the larger community to think about, is this something that because they're using an engineer that we're comfortable with, we're comfortable, or is this something that we would still want to do a peer review? And if they're using Howard Stern Hudson, we'll need to think of an alternative. So I just put that out there way in advance. Yes.
There's two separate contracts. One, the town has a contract for the deck area. This project has a contract with Howard Stein Hudson to look at their issues. The town has a contract for counting traffic in 6 spots throughout the square. This project has 5 additional spots with the same company doing more. So we're getting a better idea of what's happening out there from the 11 collected spots. Those 11 collected spots help the town project. They also help this project. Should this go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a comprehensive permit, there will be a peer review of their traffic anyways.
Right. So that was all I was pointing out.
There's a second bite coming
Totally understand.
after this one gets done.
So I'm just identifying it way in advance so that we have the ability to find an engineer, because we won't be able to use
Right.
ours.
The Zoning Board of Appeals will have a peer review for the engineering.
Understood.
They'll have another peer review for the stormwater and the traffic.
Got it. Just making sure we all know we need to find a vendor.
Yes.
That's all. And then just a quick comment. I thought one of the interesting things that the applicant said at the beginning was one in a series of many potential changes at East Milton Square. I thought that was potentially insightful and something that I hope East Milton gives a lot of thought to as they prepare for these neighborhood meetings. If this is the beginning of a sea of new proposals for East Milton over the next decade, we'll call it, just for the purposes of this. I think it's a great opportunity for East Milton to use this project as an opportunity to say, what do we want in East Milton? How do we want to be involved, and how do we want to see this? How do we want to be proactive in planning for this, so that we're not responding to individual applications, but perhaps guiding future applicants in how they move through the process. So that's my only comment, my only additional comment. Thank you.
I have comments.
Yes.
I talk a lot about the wrong places for density and the wrong places for development, being out in the woods and sensitive habitats and some of these A&Rs that we've seen come through. I personally think that this is a good place for density. I think we should look at how to make better uses of our existing previously developed spaces rather than tearing down a bunch of green space. I love the idea of adding upper story housing in East Milton. I've always questioned why we don't have it from an economic development perspective. Getting more feet on the street in the direct vicinity always improves the quality of the retail and the business uses, which I think would be excellent to see sort of a rebirth in East Milton. Obviously, I am sure that the neighborhood and others will be concerned about traffic circulation. And that's something I'm concerned with as well, so I'll reserve judgment on the project as a whole, but I think it's a very good opportunity for the town. I would also like some data on projected tax revenue and tax, service impact, which I suspect you'll be collecting through the process, but those are my initial feelings.
Yes.
I did provide comments when I met with the team individually, but for the purposes of sharing with my fellow board members and with the public, I do agree with April about where we're looking at where to put some additional density. Also, where we're looking to do mixed use, to get more opportunity out of our upper stories in our commercial districts. One of the things that the master plan has identified as something that the town should look into further. It's actually something that the master plan implementation committee has been studying or considering recommending a study. We're currently working on a study in Milton Village and the Wharf area, and we're thinking that the next place might be East Milton Square. Part of that really, you can't really do without looking at the traffic. And the bigger picture traffic than one project can be. I went to the meeting last night about the DEX project, and I've been to a meeting about the Squantum and Grandin Ave project, and I've looked at early drawings for the Granite Ave even beyond that project, which might be what they call a road diet, which would be reduction in lanes and adding of bike lanes. All of those things, all those projects individually, are individual projects, but collectively will have an impact on East Milton Square. So I advocated last night, and I'll advocate tonight for sort of that broader view and analysis of East Milton Square. But in the meantime, we do have an individual project that we need to respond to, something that we've done in other places in town. And so I do think it is something that we should work towards. I think the idea of having an additional type of housing that we don't have much of now, and again identified in the housing production plan and in the master plan, is to expand the variety and the type of housing that we have, so this would do that. The concerns that I have right now are the architecture is very early. There's a lot of work to be done, the architecture recognizing that. But in doing that, looking at the streetscape, the pedestrian scale, what the activities are. I'm concerned about having parking as the activity on Bassett Street. I'm concerned about the Adams Court could be a very interesting space. There's lots of examples of very interesting retail spaces on a pedestrian way. And that could really activate, and be a real amenity. We have some nice businesses there. They're a little disconnected. The pedestrian ways are going to get improved with the deck project. So I think we have to see how this might fit into a bigger picture of how East Milton Square could be. And the idea of it being more like a village, I think, this could assist with that. And on the parking side of it, I'd like the parking to be appropriate for the project. I'd like it not to be over-parked, because I think there can be a tendency to to try and do too much with the parking, and therefore that's going to impact what our streetscape is like. And so really sort of maybe not necessarily tying the parking necessarily to the zoning as it exists now, but actually as it would be for this type of demographic who would be living here, for the access to the public transit, whether there be opportunities for car sharing of parking spaces between the businesses and the residences, whether we could have Zipcar here or other kind of car share, taking into consideration the younger demographic, using Uber and Lyft more. That analysis, I think, should really help inform this project, and it should help us think about this area of town in general.
Can I add one thing to that on the parking? Do you mind if I
That's
jump
fine.
in front of you? So as someone that can barely see my millennial days in the rearview mirror, and actually often doubts some of the statistics about millennials as I do projects throughout New England, I think this project is a really interesting example of something that, to Cheryl's point, we should be very thoughtful about how we program the parking and the needs for infrastructure here. This project is designed in a way that it's very heavy towards one-bedrooms. The units are small. They're clearly geared towards a demographic that I think needs housing in this area, that wants housing in this area. But that demographic doesn't drive as much as many of us do. I've often said, we hear millennials don't like to drive a car until they have to put a car seat in the back of an Uber, and then they're suddenly in a car. But when you're living in a 500-square-foot, one-bedroom apartment, you're not a candidate, probably, in most cases, for a car seat. So I think we should just be sensitive to not demanding the parking, to Charles' point, conform with the zoning, because I would be afraid at that point that we might start to see this project turn into more 2- and 3-bedrooms in order to bring that parking count down. And I'm not sure that's where our demand is, and I'm not sure that's what's best for this project. So let's, I guess, to Cheryl's point, let's try to be thoughtful in coming up with a balance to what we need for supply and demand for the market, and what that actual demand is when it comes to the infrastructure, whether it be retail amenities, parking, and other features of the project. Thanks.
So I'm most interested to hear from the neighborhood. I think they're going to provide a lot of insight. I did attend one neighborhood meeting, and I thought they did raise some really interesting points about parking, that this area has had projects go in without enough parking again and again and again. They had assumed it would be this much, but then once it's all done, they're sort of stuck. So I think that's one thing that we do want to provide as much reassurance as possible to the neighborhood, because they've been burned in this regard before. I am also interested in the height impact to the town planning. I think a number of people have mentioned that. I'm looking at the pictures, and we're looking at 4- and 5-story buildings next to 2-story buildings, which makes me think that we're encouraging everything to go up, and that has pros and cons, and that's something we need to think about as a community, as a town. Is that the direction that we want to go? So that's another thing I'm most interested in hearing. It sounds like the developers might have some good insight on that, and there's other projects coming, but it's also a broader neighborhood and town-wide, plan that we need to be, this is kind of charging a path, and so we just want to be forward-thinking on that. I was wondering what the current zoning for height in this area is, and I don't know if we know that.
I think it's 45 feet.
45 feet.
45?
In the commercial zone, it's 2.5 stories, 35 feet in the residential zone.
Okay. And where are we with this one?
We're in 50, somewhere at 55-ish.
55-ish feet.
I think relative to redevelopment in the future, one of the historic outcomes of the way the town was developed is that many of the lots in East Milton are fully built on. So existing old buildings take up 80, 90, 100% of the lots, and they don't park themselves. the town has historically parked many of the businesses in East Milton. If any of those properties are going to change over, many of them are owned by families, older, 80-plus-year-olds. The building next door on Granite, which houses the women's gym and other things, is owned by a trust. The trustee is in her 80s. They have no incentive to reinvest in that building today. They've got significant capital gains tax implications if they were to sell today. But the next generation is probably going to want to cash out. And to redevelop that, my sense is that building's coming down. You're going to park underneath it, and you're going to go up with several stories. And to justify the cost to park it, you're going to have to create height and density above. The town did that in Central Village with 36 Central. It did it at 88 Wharf. It approved the project that hasn't been built at 2 Adams Street. It's doing the same thing with the Hendry's building. Density up on 3, 4, or 5 stories subsidizes the commercial on the first floor, and it subsidizes the payment of the cost of parking below. It costs $30,000 plus per space to build structured parking. That's a significant cost associated with any redevelopment in this area. And the redevelopment that will happen in this area is going to have to be dense. That's my own feeling, sense about it. I don't see how that doesn't happen, and how, as time progresses, these buildings, properties change over. When they get redeveloped, they're getting redeveloped with a lot more density and a lot more height. I think the question how all of that meets the residential neighborhood is important. It's an important consideration to how we design the building, particularly as it faces to the neighborhood. But I think that's a future reality. That is not today's reality, but I don't think that's far off in the future. And that's true of other corners in town that are owned by older individuals who are loath to reinvest today because they don't want to take on the cost and the risk, and they don't want to sell because they don't want to incur the significant capital gains tax implications about the property, on sale. So.
Okay. Anything else?
The other thing that we've sort of discussed is that corporate feeling versus that village feel. That is something that we as a town and a community and a developer could work on together if there's room for that. And I think it could make a great difference if there's flexibility on that. And also, I just wanted to ask, for our background, non-friendly 40B versus friendly 40B, and what is the difference? Just a quick thumbnail. I don't know if you can.
Well, it is to incorporate commercial into a 40B. You really need the town to buy into it. You could. A 40B is usually all residential, and here you want to do mixed use, and that makes a lot of sense. But in order to do mixed use, you're really going to have to get the town's buy-in, and in order to get the town's buy-in, you're going to need to get the neighborhood as on board as it can be.
Thank you. That's all I have.
We're not going to discuss this all the details. We're not going to say, I don't like this detail, I don't like that detail. If there are any people who want to share broad parameters about things that should be thought about before the September meeting, we'd be happy to hear them. But just getting up and saying I don't like the project is this is a concept, and you're going to be able to discuss the concept at great length later in the month. And right now, if there are broad concepts that really you feel need to be taken into account, we'd be happy to hear them. And yes, sir.
Should I move up or?
Yes, you have to come up, identify yourself.
Will do. Thank you. My name is Steve Rhines. I live on Belcher Circle. I'm also the president of the East Milton Neighborhood Association. One thing that came to mind that was referenced a couple times here was the master plan for the town. So I'd like to just read one excerpt from that, if I may. One of the key tenets is to preserve and enhance the individual character of each Milton's neighborhoods, including the natural and historic features of the neighborhood. This particular area where development is being discussed abuts the railroad district, which is a historical district. So we're obviously very cognizant of that. It's something that we take a lot of pride in our neighborhood. On 9/6, the East Milton Neighborhood Association hosted a neighborhood forum, and we did so to invite folks of precincts 6 and 7 who would be impacted potentially by this development to hear their concerns and what they were thinking. We had 175 folks attend, standing room only, and 175 folks were not in favor of this project as it's currently scoped. We are not saying we're not in favor of any kind of development in East Milton. However, this scope, as defined by several folks here today, needs iteration and needs consideration for the folks that live in the area. Our primary concerns are parking, traffic, fire and safety impacts, education. Our schools are already busting at the seams. There's consideration, I'm told, for potentially adding another elementary school to support this. This is clear. If you have 40B in there will be children in the building, so there will be some impact on the area. So we're very concerned with that. And one of the other things to think about, and I think you mentioned it earlier, was talking about planning and having thoughtful planning throughout this entire process. That's critical. We think there needs to be a town-driven system that lays out an overlay of the plan for East Milton, because we're similar right now. It seems sort of ad hoc. There's a project that's on, I think it's on Adams Street that's going up, multi-story, that no one in our neighborhood knew about until it was in the Milton Times. So communication is key. Information is key, and we look forward to working with all of you involved. Thank you. Any questions for me?
All right. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, my name is Mary Murphy. I live on 8 Rockville Place in East Milton. I also attended the meeting, and I would be happy to provide a little informal feedback. Just reiterate that the majority of people who were at that meeting were not happy the way the project stands.
And you will undoubtedly make that clear at your meeting later in September.
And I think what I would like to reiterate is just the whole idea, and the main theme that came across in the discussion was maintaining East Milton as a village, as a neighborhood. I grew up in East Milton. There are people in my neighborhood who are in their 80s, and their grandchildren are buying their house and moving in. But a development like this moves us away from being a village. A 5-story apartment building that takes up one of 2 of the major blocks in East Milton turns us from a village to just be an extension of Quincy Center. And there was a number of issues that came up, and really it's the anecdotal stories that are heartbreaking. Because of the development that happened with Abbey Park and with Navarro and the issues with parking there, you go down along Bassett Street, along Franklin Street, or any of those side streets, and they've all turned into parking lots. And cars are parked there 12 hours a day. Mother after mother got up and started talking about how she won't let her kids out of the house between 4 and 6 because traffic is just too dangerous. And so when you talk about putting in a 5-story apartment building with 71 units, and I understand your point about millennials Ubering, but every one of them that I know has a car. And trying to get up and down Bassett Street, I used to walk with my young son from my house down to Milton Marketplace. We won't do it anymore because it's just too dangerous. The way the cars come flying down, coming around the corner, down Bassett Bassett Street, and they can't get by each other because cars are parked on either side of the street and the street is not wide enough. There's just a number of those issues, and I think it would be great if any of you all could attend the neighborhood meeting that they're planning so that you can hear these stories, because they really are very impactful. And I think it all comes back to this issue about what is East Milton going to look like, and what do we as a town and the people in East Milton want East Milton to look like. I know personally I don't want to turn it into Quincy Center. So I hope you all consider that as you're moving forward with this.
Well, as I say, the neighborhood input is very important, and we're going to do, we will hopefully send a member or two to the meeting later on this month. We hear your concerns. This is developers, good developers are supposed to be responsive. And if they can be responsive, hopefully they will be.
So I have two follow-up questions in there for Mr. Corcoran. And my first is, would Falcone be amenable to discussing scaling back the project from a 5-story building to something that's more in line with what's in the square currently?
They're willing to consider what they can do relative to cost, relative to what they need for parking, relative to what they're trying to do overall. There's not a lot of room to adjust because it's a very expensive site to develop. But they're willing to, we're working with the architects on how to adjust and modify and change, and we'll do what we can.
And in terms of going friendly 40B versus unfriendly 40B, have you all had that discussion with the town in terms of would Falcone pursue an unfriendly 40B if the town is unwilling to pursue a friendly 40B?
Probably.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay.
One of the things we think, well, among the range of issues, one is parking. To the extent that you have a mix of uses, you can provide fewer parking spaces because parking spaces can be shared for different uses at different times of day. If this were to be all residential, we need more parking and not less.
Alice, can I say one more thing? Just, I really think this is an opportunity for the town, East Milton, and all of Milton to really think about how I've been saying it for 2 or 3 years now, how we're going to program the future of our town. Ned just pointed out 3 or 4 properties in East Milton Square that are owned by people who have their properties in a trust, who aren't going to sell right now, but are eventually going to sell. And the nature of real estate pricing today demands that these properties evolve. The way that we all shop, the way that we all live demands that this real estate evolve, and it's expensive. And one of the challenges with 40B that developers face is they have to build 25% of it affordable. And if they were building under an overlay district or zoning that was in place in Milton, that affordable ratio goes down to 10 or 12, and that gives them a lot more financial parameter to bring that scale down. So I'm not trying to lecture anybody. I'm not trying to tell anybody what to think. I just want us all to think about the realities of the economy, the realities of the real estate that we have in Milton, and how we want to respond to projects. Do we want to be at the front end of it and guide these projects that come before us, or do we want to keep responding to these things as they come in the door, one after the other, with 40B or without 40B? To me, it seems like we should be ahead of this thing, and we should be driving the process.
May I?
Well, we're right in the middle of it. I don't think you need to respond to that, Ned. Yes.
I just want to add a comment. One of the things that, with the Milton Village study that we've asked the MAPC to advise us about is whether some kind of what I call district parking, which is shared parking, which would allow for redevelopment of sites that are fully built out already and don't have room to park, so that we can have more vibrant districts instead of buildings that there's a lack of investment in. So that would be a more centralized or a couple of centralized shared parking arrangements. Shared meaning that one property owner isn't responsible for parking everything on site. So if we did do a study of East Milton Square, I'd like to see whether that there would be opportunity for that as a means to help with the parking situation.
If I could just come in one.
Okay, quickly, please.
One alternative I've thought about loosely, it's possible, but given timing, would be a variance approach where you might go, instead of 25% affordable, you might go 10 to 15% affordable.
Right, but there also is a zoning approach.
Not going to wait for the town to zone.
Well, I understand you're not going to wait.
Variance approach.
You say you're not going to wait.
So we
but-
won't be waiting for a zoning approach.
Waiting till May is not the end of the world.
That's a
Well, I mean, you can say that, but it's not the end of the world.
So I would discourage you from thinking about going less than 25% affordable, because then we don't get any units on the state's housing inventory. And this project would gain us a whole year of a stay from 40.
No, it would not.
Why?
Because the housing production plan has not been complied with for the past 3 years. And just because there is a year comes up that it is complied with does not give you a year stay.
I thought it was based on production.
It is, but you're supposed to keep producing year after year, and we have not met our production goals.
Okay, well, we should look into that. Because I don't know if I have the same opinion. I also don't know if I have the same opinion about mixed-use 40Bs. I think you can do a mixed-use unfriendly 40B if the underlying zoning allows for
I
commercial.
don't think it's ever been
We've
done.
had this argument before, but we'll see. So if there is a 40B stay for a year, I think that's a very attractive thing for us, since we don't have any plans for how to address 40B, long-term plans. I 100% agree with Brian and a couple of other folks here who talked about district-based planning. I think that's the best approach. I'd love to see that happen. Master plan implementation is doing it down at the wharf. But on the topic of scale, I'd encourage people to take a drive down to Central Ave. I think it's 36 Central, is that the one you just mentioned? Because I first saw these pictures and I thought, wow, this looks huge. But then I went down to Central Ave, which is more in my neighborhood, in the Central Ave Business District, and everything is much smaller in Central Ave than it is in East Milton, the commercial footprint and everything else. But there is a single-story strip adjacent to a 5-story mixed use with underground parking in that 5th floor, very similar to this design. It follows the grade. And then a single-family residential and a couple of multi-family residentials that I think are 2 stories. So just for the folks that are deeply concerned about the scaling issues and, is this going to feel so massive, take a drive by there because it's educational. You might still drive away and say, I hate that, but it does help you visualize what it could or look or feel like. It was helpful to me.
A walk by would be
A walk by also. And if you take a right off Central Ave, or Elliott, I don't know what that is, onto Brook Hill Road, you can see the back of the building, which is what the view would look like from Bassett. So it's something to think about. Again, much smaller scale, but it just helps you envision what we're talking about.
All right. We're at 8 o'clock. We're going to start a public hearing on the zoning. The zoning, which was advertised for 7:15. So, yes, sir.
And I'll be very, very brief. Jim Farley, 24 Belcher Circle. Chairman Whiteside, thank you, members. I went to the meeting, the neighborhood meeting last week, and heard, I won't belabor the board with those concerns because you will all hear them as well. But just a couple of just short points. One, I know business owners in the square who tell their employees, go and park down there because we need to preserve the flow of parking. Right, so we've got employees of the businesses parking in the residential areas during the day, sort of clogging things up. There's just little bits and pieces that I don't know if you all hear. The other thing, in my professional life, I work for a labor union. We have a housing division. We build low-income, elderly housing, mixed use, for-profit housing. I'm somewhat familiar with the process, not so much the 40B because we've never utilized 40B. And my point is that I don't personally view this in any way as a friendly 40B after going to the neighborhood meeting. And I don't know how, frankly, you're going to get there. In our projects, we've always had the support of the community, of the neighborhood groups, of the town councils or boards of selectmen. And I wouldn't have the gumption to bring this, quite frankly, for the density. There's only so much to work with, and I have sympathy for developers. I don't want the planning board or the Board of Appeals or the Board of Selectmen to be saying to developers, we don't want you, we don't want your good business, we don't want your smart planning. I just don't think that this is even, quite frankly, a starting point in its current configuration. I think that's what has people most upset, is what they view as a scale and the current issues in the square. So, how we get there, what can be possible, but to hear this little room is not a good start of conversation.
Okay. When you say scale, do you mean the height and the size of the...
Both the density and the streetscape and the height and the pedestrian experience and the shopping experience. And quite frankly, there are many times I don't go to the square myself. I live on Belcher Circle. Like my neighbor, I don't walk there very often, and it's hard to drive there. And there are times where I just don't bother. So quite frankly, on the retail side, there comes a point where people just go to Quincy or they go to Boston or they don't go. So I'm not sure that works in total. That's for the developer to figure out.
40B is supposed to be a 40B with community support.
Right.
That's what it's supposed to be. And you're having a meeting, and they're going to do their best to secure support. And if they can't secure support, they'll consider other options. I expect, that's my viewpoint, because without neighborhood support, I'm rather doubtful whether the selectmen will agree to sponsor it. That's what I suspect, but my suspicions are just that. Now, it's
Chairman.
Thank you.
8 o'clock. We're going to do our public hearing. If anyone really feels like they've been cut off without being able to say anything, at the end of the meeting, we'll be happy to hear more.
What about the historic delay bylaw? We have people here for the historic delay bylaw.
We're going to discuss the bylaws next.
Oh, okay.
We're going to go into our hearing on I'm simply saying
Okay.
that if any of you folks feel there's something that the planning board just has to know
I see what you're trying to say.
at the end of the meeting, but you can watch on TV now. At the end of the meeting, we'll ask you. So now, we're going to we've got a whole bunch of zoning, and everyone's welcome to discuss the zoning if they like. We've got a whole bunch of zoning, 10 articles. Advertising signs in the business district.
About zoning. I'm a little offended by this.
Bicycle parking. We've got a proposed bylaw on bylaws updating and access, which has to do with getting the zoning bylaws and the general bylaw in up-to-date booklets so that people can see what the zoning and the general bylaws provide with ease and convenience. We're redesignating certain sections, just a housekeeping matter. We've got an article on the maintenance of buildings, saying they've got to be kept in good condition. We've got an article on prohibition of marijuana establishments. We have an article regarding pre-existing non-conforming structures which have a non-conformity, and in certain circumstances, the bylaw would allow that non-conformity to be extended. We have a amendment regarding temporary signs, which basically establishes a size limit for temporary signs, which we don't currently have. There are a couple of other articles.
What happened to the revolving fund?
The revolving fund we never got any other community's revolving fund. We never got any information about another community that had a revolving fund.
We got
And so
something from the
we
state,
pushed it
but-
off till May.
Okay, well, guess we won't get any money from Falcone.
But we might.
We might. We don't have anywhere to put it, though.
In any event, we got nothing. I asked about Newton. Newton apparently didn't have it.
It's in there. They would like to have a fund. They haven't figured it out yet. It's in their plan to achieve one. They don't have anything
All right.
at this time.
May.
You
May.
need another one? I have an extra.
May.
May. Okay, you were mentioning
Historic delay bylaw?
the historic, that's something the Historic Commission has proposed.
Okay.
And we have a historic commissioner here who is able to, I mean, we're happy to throw our support if it sounds like a good bylaw. We didn't get provided a copy. Maybe we could,
I'm sorry?
well, in any event, why don't we hear from the Historic Commission about your bylaw?
I'll be very quick.
And any other of the bylaws you wanted, the Historical Commission wants to comment on.
I'm Steve O'Donnell, Chair of the Historical Commission. Tonight with us also is Meredith Hall, member, and Bill Mullen, member. We have proposed to amend and update what's commonly known as the demolition delay bylaw, officially the demolition of historically significant buildings. The present bylaw was passed by town meeting about 10 and a half years ago. We feel it's time to update it. 3 specific updates. The trigger year for having a demolition application come before the commission is 1919. When the bylaw was proposed 10 years ago, it was proposed to affect buildings older than 78 years. At town meeting, a prominent town meeting member who had a building which would have fallen under the bylaw prevailed in having the trigger year moved back 10 years to 88 years. What we're proposing now is a trigger year 75 years prior to the application, rather than a specific year, 75 years before, so the year would constantly move forward as time went on. Essentially, again, going back to the original proposal. Second item is really housekeeping. The bylaw provides for 4 copies of a demolition plan to be provided to the Historical Commission when a demolition plan is necessary. We're proposing to make that 8. There are 7 members on the commission. The planning office needs 1. It's much simpler for them to provide 8 copies. The third element is the demolition delay period. It's currently 9 months. We're proposing that it be changed to 24 months. 9 months is too short a time. 9 months is like a long weekend to a developer. And we have to keep in mind the purpose of the demolition delay period. If a building is found to be historically significant and preferably preserved after a public hearing, the demolition delay period is imposed. The purpose is to give interested parties an opportunity to come up with an alternative to demolition. This takes time, it takes money, it involves reworking plans, including an existing building and a larger development, remodeling, renovating, perhaps even relocating the building. 9 months is simply not long enough. The Historical Commission is charged with and is concerned about retaining the historic character of the town. Not necessarily just a building, but the town. This includes neighborhoods, vistas. So many towns have found they have issues in the neighborhoods that were built mid-20th century. Between World War II, post-World War II, whole neighborhoods were built up as they have been in Milton. And as developers go in and tear down this house and build a McMansion, and tear down that house and build a McMansion, it destroys the character of the neighborhood. There needs to be a longer demolition delay period. Now, the other element is the fact that we have a demolition delay period actually discourages applications for demolition. If an applicant knows that he's going to have to wait a period of time, he's discouraged. I'm thinking of a particular house this year where an owner bought it. After he bought it, he thought, well, I think I'll tear it down. Called his attorney, said, I want to tear it down. The attorney said, well, okay, but keep in mind it's going to take you about a year from the time you filed the initial demolition application until after your 9-month demolition delay period expires. And he said, okay, then I won't tear it down. I'll remodel it, renovate it. So those are the 3 specific things that we're proposing in the amendment, and we would hope to have your support.
All right. We will, when we get to recommending things, we will, or maybe you want to recommend it now. Does anyone have any questions about this? Is 24 months too long?
Yeah, I'll make a comment. I mean, I think one thing I want to point out to you is you sort of reference 9 months as a long weekend to a developer. And then the last story you just told suggested that a 9-month period changed a developer's mind. So
this wasn't a developer, though. It was a homeowner.
That's fine. 9 months is not a long weekend to a developer. It's the make or break of a project in many cases. So I think 24 months is a death sentence for many projects. And I think it's way too long. If it was structured in a way that there was progress being made during that 9 months, then perhaps there could be an extension of it or something. But to just blanket put 24 months on every building, to me, seems very much against economic development, and I have a real problem with it. I'm actually curious in the other direction about your desire to not fix historic on a specific year as opposed to having it rolling for 75 years. But I guess I understand that. Now that I've started to speak, I get what you're trying to do.
It avoids coming back again.
That actually makes sense to me now that I say that. So I'm okay with that.
History is a rolling wave.
I understand. I was thinking it was going in a different direction. You're absolutely right on that point. I obviously have no problem with the plans. I would prefer to see the 24 months reflect progress. In other words, if a building was determined to have a viable alternative and there were plans and actions being taken to come up with an alternative, then perhaps there could be a rolling 3-month extension or something up to 24 months. But I just find 24 months to be too long.
All right. Well, why don't we, rather than discuss this while other people are waiting to comment on our zoning, since this isn't our zoning, and in fact, is it zoning?
It's bylaw. Bylaw.
It's a general bylaw.
I just asked
In
one
any event, I think that we should discuss this.
Can I ask a question? It's not really, I have comments for discussion, but just the question is, how did you arrive at 24 months? Did you compare it to other bylaw, or other towns, or?
Yes and no. We have found that towns have been extending. Those that had 6 months have gone to 12. Those that have 9 have gone to 15, 18, because they're all finding it's just not long enough. And in terms of progress, if there's a 24-month demolition delay and the developer has reworked the project so he's now no longer going to demolish, it doesn't matter what the demolition delay period is. He's not going to demolish anymore.
Right, but a home that's determined, or a building that's determined to not really have a viable alternative is now sitting there waiting for another 22 months.
Let me just add this really quickly. We've had 2, one this year, one last year. historically significant buildings. Both cases, we voted that they were not preferably preserved, both in terms of physical condition and one in terms of location. It just wasn't a location that would have been viable as a residence.
And that stops the demolition delay period?
There was no demolition. Once it's found to, the only
So
time-
that never triggers the demolition?
That's right.
Okay.
Exactly. It was found not preferably preserved.
Understood.
That's it.
Okay.
I have one quick question.
Okay.
Just one quick question, Alex.
No, absolutely. Ask, and Cheryl, you can make your comments also, but we do want to.
I want him to have the alternative to think about these and maybe
Yeah.
Well,
make a change.
I think that's a good
My
point.
question is, do we know what percentage of our building stock is older than 75 years or younger? Okay. It must be a significant amount, I'm thinking.
It's gotta be.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't
I think that would
that's
be
ever
helpful
been
for us to
studied.
know, because if it covers every single building in town, that might be something we want to think about. My personal perspective, I've made an entire career out of moving government at the speed of business, but I think in some places, like preserving historic structures, a delay makes sense. I think extending from 9 months makes sense for a lot of the reasons that you described, though I did have the same reaction to 24 months seems like a very, very long time, but I'm looking forward to discussing it.
So Alex, the comment I wanted to make is that some communities have a lot more tools in the toolbox in terms of preserving historic buildings. This is the only tool that Milton has. And number one, I think you'll find everybody saying that they will agree with when it comes to development. They want to maintain the character of the town and of their neighborhoods.
Yep.
We've talked about a lot with View over on the Carberry property. We've talked about saving homes there as part of those developments. So I do think we should give serious consideration to improving the tools. The one tool we do have, I'd actually like us to think of adding other tools.
That's what I want.
That's another topic than this.
Oh, yeah.
The only question I have is really going, it seems like a big jump from 9 to 24, and I just would like to think about that 24 a little bit more.
One of our whole purposes here was trying to create a situation where we didn't have to keep coming back. Oh, well, you know, we have 1935 now. In 10 years, well, can we have 1945? Or, well, we had 9, we went to 12, and we're back in a few years. Well, we really need 24. So we're trying to be proactive. I think one of your comments, you're trying to get ahead of the curve or ahead of the rolling ball, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do.
So we will have actual copies of this distributed to the members so they can read it, and we will, at our next meeting, let you know.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now we have all those other bylaws, and we have an attorney here to address them at length, hopefully.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Peter Mullen, 19 Gaskins Road, Town Meeting Member Precinct 2, and Chairman of the town's Bylaw Review Committee. The proposed article
Is that a new committee?
attracted my attention.
Is that a new committee?
It is. Well, it was voted by town meeting in 2015. It wasn't staffed until 2016.
Great.
The article that you have that attracted my committee's attention and my own is your article about bylaw updating and access. And I've spoken with Bill Clark about it. I've also spoken with Susan Galvin about it. I believe Susan is here and wants to address this tonight as well. Your article is quite broad in the sense that it covers not only the zoning bylaw, but it covers all of the general bylaws of the town. And in some ways, I think I understand the motivation for the article, that there's a frustration in not having an easy reference of what are the bylaws of the town, either the general bylaws or the zoning bylaw, something that you can refer to and know that it's accurate and that it is what the existing bylaws are. We on the Bylaw Review Committee share that frustration, that problem. We've spoken with Susan about it, and she has a lot of problems as well. I believe it's accurate to say that the last time there was a published set of the town's bylaws was 1986. There's a set of general bylaws on the town's website that purport to be accurate up through the May 2007 town meeting, although I'm not sure there's anyone that knows how that was created. And it exists electronically only, I believe. I think there's an edition of the zoning bylaw that purports to be up through 2009. I have a suggestion for you with regard to your article. I think your article, as it's drafted, won't change anything. Your article is to see if the town will vote to authorize the clerk to do updated, readily available bylaws. She doesn't need an article to be authorized to do that. She could do that now if she had the resources. So as drafted, I don't think your article will do anything. My suggestion would be that you postpone this at least through next year's annual town meeting in the spring of 2018. And in the 6 months between the two meetings, we see if we can get together some kind of a working group that would include this board, the Bylaw Review Committee, perhaps the town administrator, and the clerk's office, and see if we can put together a group with enough resources so that there can be a review of the existing bylaws, review of the records of town meetings that have changed that, and come up with an accurate set, both electronic and paper. I think that's perhaps more likely to result in change.
We have an unofficial copy of the bylaws, which the planning board uses because we can't use the official version because it is so outdated. We have prepared an absolutely up-to-date copy of the zoning bylaw, which has been proofread by the town clerk, and the only reason it hasn't been published is because there was an article in a warrant several years ago when we suggested that the bylaw be broken into 2 volumes. Town council said, well, you've got to have town meeting adopt the index. Town meeting adopt the index, and now there is a question of the index needs revision, but it's been adopted by town meeting, and therefore the town meeting has to vote to change the index. This would allow the town clerk to issue what is a absolutely up-to-date copy of the bylaw. When the Attorney General approves last time's articles, they can be easily added, but there is no work to be done here. It's been done. The only thing that keeps it from being issued is the index. The idea that the index is somehow carved in stone and never can be changed without a vote of town meeting. This would allow the town clerk to index the zoning bylaw, and it's been indexed. We have an index. It's ready to go.
I'll allow, Susan, I think, is probably better able to address that issue than I am. But let me say what you're suggesting is that it be issued as the zoning bylaw of the town under the authority of the town clerk. And she basically says, you may have done the work, you may have put it together, but I didn't. And if you want it issued in my name.
The clerk has proofread it.
My suggestion to you is that you should defer this for 6 months.
This is something we asked that be done 3 years ago. 3 years ago, and we've periodically asked about it again and again, saying that having a current copy of the bylaw should be absolute priority for the town. Should be a priority of your group, too, and not kick it down the road till May, and then probably sometime next summer. I mean, when we get sworn in, we're supposed to say we pledge to uphold the bylaws of the town. How can we possibly know what they are? It's not right.
I fully agree with the comment that, we need to have up-to-date and readily available bylaws. The question is, what's the best way to get there?
Well, the best way is to adopt this and then put the index, adopt the index, and issue the zoning bylaw. And the general bylaw, fine. Hire someone to put it together. It's not impossible.
Would adding a budget item, a line item, a budget to support,
So, I agree. I'm in support of having up-to-date, accurate bylaws. But my major concern for this is we have to be realistic. And right now, yes, my office, along with a member of the planning board staff, reviewed just the articles from 2007 from 2009 to current. My fear is there has been a lot of hands from the articles of when they've been established to 2009. I don't know whose hands have been in that. They need to be reviewed. And as we all know, the importance of them. That is my...
You want to review the official copy that was issued in 2009?
Yes.
You already certify that it's correct.
I'm certifying that
You attach all the amendments to it.
So I can honestly say that the true copy attests addendums are correct.
But you don't certify the zoning bylaw?
Not the way that they are, no.
Well, then,
It's hard for me to
what-
say with 100% assurance that they are accurate. I have not typed them, nor has a member of my staff typed
The
them.
court requires that the entire zoning bylaw be certified, and if you won't certify the bulk of it, then
So
basically
what I'd like to recommend
we've got a problem.
is that before we put this article to town meeting, that let's get the current bylaws in shape. And how I recommend, and I have said this many times, is that I think we need a codification system. I've researched it. I have an actual bid. It's a little outdated. The last one I have is from August 29th, 2016. It costs the town relatively inexpensive money of $10,000 to have all of our zoning and general bylaws codified, readily available for our residents, for our elected officials, and very searchable. A lot of towns do this, and I think that is the appropriate way.
We have $10,000. When can we do it?
Pardon?
Can we start next week? We've got
I can start
$10,000
tomorrow
in our
and contact
budget.
a company, and I would love to. I don't have the funding to do so.
Well, if we gave you the funding, would you do it?
I would be on the phone tomorrow.
A motion?
I second.
I think that we should authorize a $10,000 expenditure. If it's...
just said I'd
if
make a
this is-
motion.
Okay.
Do we have money in
a
the budget?
second?
We have money in the budget for that.
What?
Do we have money in the budget?
Yes.
We do.
Yeah, we have $17,000.
Okay.
Well, we have $15,000. Just to be clear, we have
So
$15,000.
this,
So
as I
that's
said,
from
is-
miscellaneous.
We've got $50,000 for planning.
15.
So,
Oh, sorry. We have 30. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to make sure we're using the right number here. You're right.
as I
Contractual
said,
service,
this is
30,000.
a year old, so I would have to get a revised
Give you a little-
recommendation. I will call them tomorrow,
Okay.
then there is an ongoing that I would put forward in my budget for maintenance.
Well, you don't have to since you're going to get it from us.
Well, no, every year.
After,
Oh,
every
okay.
year,
It needs
after
to
the
be
Attorney
updated.
General
All right,
accepts
well,
the bylaws, it would be.
we have
We'll end up forgetting to do it. It's almost a
we have a motion on the floor.
I'd suggest to you that you review some of the towns that use this service. It's E-code is the service. I think Braintree, there's, I don't know, Dedham uses them, I think. There's a bunch of towns. It will not be an easy process to convert our existing bylaws into their format. They do it kind of by word topics. They'll have to come up with some way to organize this. I'm not sure whether you can spend your money on codifying the general bylaws. You can certainly, you might be able to do the zoning bylaw. And it will not be a simple, easy process. I haven't seen...
Indexing hasn't been a simple or easy process.
Right, and this is going to be into a searchable database. I'd suggest to you that if you want to, if the town wants to go that way, I think it's due diligence requires that somebody sit down with one of these codifying agencies and see how they would do
How
that.
about your committee doing it?
I've
Your
talked-
bylaw committee?
Our clerk did it.
I've talked to them
All right,
numerous times.
but just give comfort, Peter, to your committee. Could someone on it check this out?
We've met with Susan about it. We've gotten a proposal from Susan. We haven't met with a representative of the company that does this.
Well, do you
And
plan
we
to-
might be able to do
Do
that.
you plan to do it?
We don't have a plan right now to do that, no. I mean, we're trying to go through the content of the bylaws and whether or not the substance of the bylaws
I
need to
mean,
be
what
changed.
we're going to do is we're going to revise our unofficial, we use the unofficial copy of the bylaw. We don't use the, anything we get from the town clerk at this point because it's impossible. Yes.
Could I suggest that Lauren or Bill work with Susan, with the consultant, to make sure that it would serve the best purposes for the zoning purpose versus general bylaw? One of the things as a practitioner in terms of architecture and using and referencing zoning bylaws in other communities, having a searchable zoning bylaw. Right now, anybody who wants to do something in Milton has to set up an appointment with our building commissioner and come down and go over it with him because they don't have access to the information. It takes a lot of his time. It's a very inefficient way to do things. And this is something that's been talked about, as Alex said, for a long time. It was talked about when I was on the warrant committee, which was before I was on this board. And I would really, really think this is going to make huge strides. Even neighbor, community, property owners want to know what they can do with their home. They have to call an attorney or they have to go meet with the commissioner right now or call an architect or call an engineer. It really should be a lot more user-friendly, and this would get us there.
So I want to clarify something that I just heard you say, Mr. Mullen. It sounds like you were suggesting that you want to go, your committee wants to go through the bylaws and really understand them and decide if there needs to be changes to the bylaws?
That is correct.
Okay.
And
I'm
I'd
on board.
suggest that
I'm on
anybody who
board with
wants
that.
to find out-of-date bylaws, read Chapter 6.
Yeah,
which is
Mr. Mullen, I'm 100% on board with that. I think a lot of the people on this board and probably in this room are on board with that. That's going to take a long time. In the meantime, we have to do our job, and we can't do it right now. So for the relatively short money of $10,000, we can do it twice if you come up with changes that we need to make.
And I'm sure in talking with the company, I suggest, can we start on the zoning and incorporate?
We might just limit it to the zoning.
I would limit it to the zoning for
Let's
now,
get
and
their
I modify my
let's get their
motion.
proposal, and then we will vote on it next time. Let's get a proposal from them.
I'll email it to you.
I just want to second Cheryl's comments. I do business in a lot of different towns, and I've never seen any other town as archaic as ours when it comes to trying to find a transparent zoning bylaw. So I wholeheartedly support clerk clerk's idea.
We still need official.
All right, I think that actually what we use is not, is pretty convenient, Peter. We should get you a copy.
Actually, the zoning bylaw is one of the things that was excluded from the scope of our committee.
Oh, okay.
Stepping on our toes.
Well, then get off of here.
Exciting work here.
All right. Would you get us a proposal, and if they, let's get going with this. And in the meantime, it does seem to me that giving the clerk the authority to index the zoning is a good idea, because there is a question whether or not the index to the zoning is frozen because it appears in a town meeting vote. Yes?
I'm not sure that that comes across in the language of the article that you've got here.
Well, but it does, doesn't it? I think it does. It says accurately indexed.
You vote to authorize the clerk.
Separately format and index Chapter 10 known as the zoning bylaws, and make up-to-date, accurately indexed print and digital copies of the zoning bylaws conveniently available.
To the public, that's correct.
Yeah, well,
She's authorized to do that. It doesn't say she's authorized to create the index or adjust the index as other things are adopted.
Of course, what does it mean?
It means that she's authorized to make a certain thing available to the, conveniently available to the public.
What about the next line?
It says to separately format an index. Chapter 10, she's supposed to index it. It says to index it.
Right.
So she.
But it doesn't say that you can then, arguably it does.
Yes, it does. It says, and promptly incorporate and index future amendments, it says.
So can I just, I know that you always put what chapter and everything it should be. I think in order to maybe make this work, in your future articles, maybe you should say, to be determined by the town clerk. And then this, with that language, may make it a little bit.
But you would have to do that very quickly. I mean, what we've done in a separate article is simply take a few of these unleaded. This is for our unofficial copy of the zoning bylaws, because we do keep it up to date. And, I think that we're going to make it more widely available, since you have some doubt as to the veracity of the zoning bylaw that was issued in 2009.
I hope that they are 100% correct.
Right.
It just,
with
many hands, something could have.
I mean, someone determined it was 100% correct back in 2009. Was that Mr. Mullen?
More than likely.
He was
yes.
a good
Yes.
clerk.
Yeah, he was an excellent clerk.
And he
However, that actual document was not in the clerk's possession. So during that time, how it got up onto the digitalized, I am not 100% sure.
Well, I mean, when you digitalize it, I assume that you're going to take what we have, what we currently use, and digitize it.
Correct. I mean, that would be the
Right. That
proper
would be
format, but
the
it's
easiest way
been
to do it.
translated back into Word, translated back into a PDF, translate.
But
There's a chance of an error.
hopefully all this stuff
I hope there isn't.
Hopefully all these articles, like these articles, it's on some sort of electronic format that you can just plug it in. Because retyping it is where the problem lies. If you
And that 2007?
The stuff that gets printed in the annual report is the stuff that should go into the zoning bylaw.
Wow.
All right, so shall we, you're going to get a request for proposals, and we're going to act on it at our next meeting. All right. And Peter?
I have some comments on some of the other
I
articles.
was hoping you would.
I would suggest, though, that in connection with creating the request for proposal, the key thing is what's the document where the codifier uses as a starting point.
I think you really have to use our unofficial copy of the zoning, which you've proofread, and it's, as far as you're concerned, it's fine, except you don't know about the 2009 zoning, which you want to reinvent, or you want to proofread the entire. I mean, you've already proofread the zoning bylaw, but you want to compare the 2009 to the town meeting votes, which is going to take you a lot of time. So let's work with the unofficial planning board copy, which you have in fact proofread.
I suggest if the proposal is similar to the proposal that Susan got last year, what this service does is you give them the documents. You say, what your beginning point is. They go through a process of creating the codification and moving topics around. They consult back and forth, and then at the end of that process, they have you adopt the code that they've created at a town meeting as the newest version of your bylaws. And then thereafter, they just update it as you go along.
Well, for $10,000, if they can do it, that would be great. And it's certainly worth a try. Because if it can be,
other towns
if you can just plug stuff into it and it's immediately up to date, this would be so great.
So when do
Dedham is so easy. I mean, we just mentioned Dedham is so easy.
It's life-changing for clerks that have gone through the process.
We want to be like Dedham.
Oh, good.
I don't necessarily, but I would like to be able to read the bylaw like I can read Dedham's.
You'd like to be able to read
Any
the bylaw just like the people in Dedham do.
That's fine.
All right, now, I think we've
With regard to your advertising signs in business districts, these are all fairly narrow comments. On the fourth page, subsection C, actions by the sign review committee. Essentially, in there, it requires that in certain
Sorry,
circumstances...
can you give a number, because we don't have the same pagination, I don't.
It's the, I guess it's
3C
section 4C.
Freestanding?
It's actions by the sign review committee.
Okay, it's this.
Never mind.
Essentially, this...
4C where?
Small c.
Small c.
Okay.
4C where?
It's the one...
Action by the sign
He's asking where under fall C,
The one like
4C.
this.
Yeah, he's
I understand that. I'm just saying, where in this article are you talking about?
Small c.
Well, 4C.
Right.
Yep, you're there. You're right there.
On
Where?
4C, where?
Where in 4C?
This provision requires public hearings with regard to certain actions. And it says that public hearings require published notice at least 1 week before the date of the hearing. It doesn't say who's paying for the public notice. It seems to me you may want to put in some language that
Or at the
it's
expense of applicant.
That's right. And it doesn't say how it's going to be published. And I don't know whether you want to put anything into that effect.
Okay. How expensive applicant? Okay. Got it.
With regard to your bicycle parking
That's it for that.
article,
That's all you have to say about that?
No.
You didn't even pick up the
On the alternative?
double facades in 4A1.
How about on D? On that same one. Appeal to the Board of Appeals, appeal to the Board of Selectmen.
I'm not sure. I don't have a preference at this point.
I have asked the selectmen, I've said, we really need you to tell us which one of these you like. It isn't up to us. It's up to the selectmen.
I understand that. I'm going to tell you what the Board of Appeals thinks.
What does the Board of
The
Appeals
Board of
think?
Appeals feels that it should go back to the selectmen because
Of
the
course they feel that way.
because the selectmen can do things that the Board of Appeals cannot. They can be a little more lenient and a little more, they can be a little nicer to the signed applicant than the Board of Appeals can. The Board of Appeals is
But this also gives them the ability to make their own rules.
Yeah, do we want that?
I know, that's
Isn't
what
that
I
the
was-
problem we have
We've
now?
already
they're going to follow
thrown it to the sign review committee, which is subject to approval of the Board of Selectmen. I mean, these are standards that you use, but they can be overruled by the design review committee.
I thought this was a public hearing, and that we were going to get a chance to, make comments on these, the use of people's time.
Okay, go.
With regard to bicycle parking, there's 2 paragraphs to this. The last line of the first paragraph, there's a clause there that says, provided that the planning board may modify the requirements for good cause. I think you want to insert a comma before that clause. You've done that in the other 2 places.
A comma before what?
Before provided.
In the last line of the first paragraph,
units?
number of units, comma.
Okay. Got it.
With regard to your designation of sections, you have a clause, and anything related thereto. I think you want to insert the words "to act on."
And to act on anything related thereto. Do we have that in the other places?
In most places you don't. At least one place you do.
And in some places, we don't have it at all.
That's right.
So we should be consistent.
Or at least have a reason why you're not. With regard to maintenance of buildings, I've read this a lot of times, and I'm not sure exactly what it means. You say, in any zoning district, all buildings shall be maintained.
Yeah.
That's in any district. I don't know whether you mean in all districts, or that each building, or all buildings. You say all buildings.
So you think in all zoning districts, all buildings?
Yeah.
That will do it.
And I'm not sure what the implications are of saying that they're going to be maintained either by the owners or other responsible persons. That seems vague to me. And I don't know whether if you had an enforcement action against an owner, that person could say, oh, I thought the other responsible persons were going to do that.
I think that, some owners lease these things, and it's...
Well, that seems to me raises a real problem of whose obligation is it? Is it the lessee or the lessor?
I think that you've got a point. This came from a citizen who was concerned that some of the buildings down the street from her were in tough shape. And this is just to give the zoning officer a little more authority. And admittedly, maybe the owner will say someone else is responsible, but if so, then we can go after that person.
Or should we,
I'd leave it to the owner to go after that person personally,
Yeah.
because I think we won't
So you
have
think
any.
just strike,
I would say by
if you
others.
strike or other responsible person,
think so.
would that be better?
I think so.
It seems to me that's the only
Yeah.
person you can impose the obligation
The person
on.
we have a
Yeah.
contract with, so to speak.
Okay, so I think that's all right.
Okay.
With regard to your pre-existing non-conforming structures, I think you need to insert some language at the beginning about to see if the town will vote.
to act on anything else. Okay.
In your article about construction noise, you talk about adding a chapter 24. We did that at our last town meeting.
Chapter 26.
So that, well, that depends upon whether or not your chapter 25 gets adopted or not. So that, I don't know whether you want to insert the chapter number or not, but in any event, it should not be 24.
We will defer to you for the correct number.
Well, we have 24 chapters as of right now.
That goes back to Sue's comments from before, where you leave it blank and she'll fill it in at the particular meeting.
No, I understand that, but if we have 24, why can't we just say we're doing chapter 25? I mean,
Well, you've got an article that proposes 25, and if it doesn't get
which one
adopted,
is that?
it's your marijuana one. One of your marijuana ones.
Well, it probably will. Why don't we make this 26? We can always change the number.
That's correct, or you can leave it blank.
We can, but you see, they don't get filled in.
Well, they will by the clerk.
Look, I think that if you want it blank, you're the general
No.
you're the general bylaw review committee.
We're reviewing the substance of bylaws.
I think that you should like a number. That's what I think. But if you don't like a number, we won't put one in.
Let's pick one out of the board. You're going to pick one number or no number?
I'd like 26.
Go with 26?
All right, let's go with 26. It's just easier than saying a number to be assigned by the town clerk. I mean, once this will go into the record, and people will know that it's chapter 26. And that will be good.
I agree.
Because by then we'll have a up-to-date set of bylaws that you can easily consult. But until then, if you don't know the number, you're really lost.
With regard to your marijuana establishments, you have two proposals.
Yeah.
One, to adopt a new chapter to the general bylaws of the town prohibiting marijuana facilities, and the other amending the zoning bylaw to prohibit marijuana establishments in the town. I can't see any difference between the two.
I can explain it, though.
I can't understand why we would do it twice.
I can't understand it either.
There was a reason.
There is a reason.
Well, you just said you couldn't understand it.
Well, I don't understand the reason, but
The reason that we were thinking when we did this, go ahead.
It's belt and suspenders. If one gets turned down, the other's not going to. That's town council's.
in other words, one only takes 50%.
No, there was another, well, there was a more
But
practical.
it is true that if the zoning gets turned down and we do the general, we only need 51% or 50.1%.
There was a more practical reason, which was the zoning bylaw can only be enforced by the code enforcement officer, where the general bylaw for marijuana could also be enforced by civil authorities like the police. So there was a logic when we had this discussion to have it in both bylaws so that both the police and the inspectional services could be enforcement agents over this.
That makes sense to me. Now I understand it, why we did it.
I think that it's superfluous, and if the question is who's going to be the enforcing person, then the town should just make a decision. Do you want I guess the police department has authority to enforce the town bylaws. Do we want them to enforce that prohibition, or do we want the building commissioner to enforce it?
Well, if it's in the zoning, I don't think, the police don't enforce the zoning.
That's right.
We've run into this with the noise.
But this is a zoning matter. So I think that, Brian, I think that you've convinced me that it's a great idea.
That's how I did it the first time, too, by the way.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Mr. Mullin.
Thank you. We're a little punchy tonight. Thank you for bearing with us.
Okay, who else wants to talk about the zoning? All right, well, we've had a lot of good, constructive comments. Thank you for coming in, Peter, because if you hadn't, we would be sunk. All right, now, 333 Brush Hill Road.
Do we have any further comments on any of these?
Well, I think I asked, didn't I?
Oh, I don't
Does
know.
anyone else want to comment on the zoning, any of the zoning? No, there's not. I think that we should close the hearing. What do you want?
I want to know if you're going to take a vote so that when you go to the warrant committee on Monday to talk to them about what the planning board feels about these articles, how are you going to explain it to them?
All right, do we generally support them with the changes that have been, well, I mean, we've got to make the changes before we, I mean, we know what the changes are. Do we support those things?
The changes will be your recommendation to the warrant committee.
Right.
How do we have I think there is an alternate language in here. Are we going to submit it with alternate language, or are we going to?
We're going to leave it the alternate language, and the warrant committee is going to talk to the selectmen.
Got it, okay.
So shall we recommend these things as our recommendations, as with the Mr. Mullins?
Can I just ask one question before? Did we decide which one we wanted? Did we want it to go to the selectmen? I think it was the sign review. Oh, I'm sorry.
Leaving
You've
the
got
alternate language
Okay.
is what we're going to do.
alternate. Okay, thank
And
you.
are you going to add, we're going to add the to any act to take any further action?
Right.
We're going to do
Right, I'm going
Great.
to do that.
So moved.
Second.
Second. I'm in favor.
All in favor?
Hi.
Okay, so
Tenny's taking over.
no one's going to say the planning board are slackers. Well, no one is going to say with justice that the planning board are slackers. 333 Brush Hill Road. Now, we have a letter from Ms. Meach saying, why did everything get cut down when it wasn't supposed to get cut down? And I asked for Mr. Clark to prepare a report.
She spoke last time.
I don't have it, but I have it for the rest of the site.
I didn't see that.
Does anybody have a copy of the letter submitted from Ms. Meach? I didn't get it. I heard that it may have come through email, but I didn't see it.
I can read it into the record if I can find it quickly.
Yeah.
Did you get it?
That's what I'm trying to remember. I don't remember seeing it, but
Well, it was dear Mr. Whiteside and members of the planning board, but she may have only sent it to me.
Oh.
okay.
But I responded, saying that we would address it at this meeting.
Okay.
And I asked, I gave, Bill had a copy of the letter. I said, could you respond to this? Shall we read the letter? Does someone have it?
I have it.
For some reason, I don't come across it.
For the record, Dear Mr. Whiteside and Planning Board members, I suspect you would prefer that I not come to Thursday night's meeting, and I understand that you have many matters to attend to, but I sincerely would like to know the answer to my question at last meeting as to why clear cutting of trees took place in the new construction area, especially since the Planning Board instructed the contractor to protect. You had said at the meeting that you would research the matter, and if you've learned anything, I hope you'll inform me too. Thank you for your attention, Linda Meach.
Thanks.
And I sent a comment back saying that I've sent this to Bill and asked for him to address it. So,
And I just said I didn't have time yesterday to write that letter for this. Had a meeting for the Brush Hill, for East Milton yesterday, and it kind of took a whole lot more time than I would have taken and spent on this. But I do have other things for this particular project. I know that the developer isn't here. I know that he has other issues that he called with yesterday, called with today. Paving was completed today. I know that the drainage is now waiting for an engineer review. The engineer is due to be there next Monday. I know the landscape architect is working with the arborist for the tree replacement plan. They haven't finished. I'm still waiting for the peer review person from our engineer for what CEC is going to do. We have issues going on at that particular site. Several police reports have been filed.
are these planning board matters or are these?
They're actually not,
police
but they
matters?
are what's slowing down the process. I did check with
our particular issue is landscaping.
yours is finishing the project to the point of getting the drainage in place and the landscape.
Going and
The landscape.
then landscaping according to an approved landscaping
Correct.
plan. And what they were supposed to do is survey what's there so that, including whatever trees are remaining.
Yep.
And then a landscape architect is to do a landscaping plan, and we would then look at it and hopefully approve it in time to get everything put in before winter. But they are supposed to survey the site so that we know what's there. So you just, I mean, this is not should not be a surprise to them because it's what we said in our interim order. We said we'd like you to survey the site. We want that drainage reviewed. We certainly don't want the drainage system filled with mud. I think that putting down a binder on the road is probably not a bad idea, but the big thing is getting it landscaped. And we're going to need a landscaping plan, and we don't have one yet. And I don't know do they understand this, that what the landscape architect is doing is subject to approval?
They do, and I told them your comment about stonewalling, and they're like, they're not
doing
going
it.
Monday.
Okay.
Bill, though, if they're working on a landscape plan without an existing condition survey, it could be inaccurate in terms of what they're planning to do. So they really need to get that survey done.
The three of them need to work, the arborist, landscape architect, and the engineer. The engineer's going back on Monday. The arborist and the landscape architect have been talking themselves, and now they have to go back and talk to the engineer. Engineer's coming back on Monday.
So I'm sorry, where are we on the stormwater peer review?
We
completed.
It's completed.
Lisa Eggleston actually did
Oh, she
a
did.
peer review of the system, and we're just asking the engineer to look at the
second look,
drainage
right.
in light of the problems that have been experienced to
We're asking the town
reassure
engineer
us.
to do that?
what?
No, the town engineer signed off on what was put into the ground.
Yes.
The CEC is the engineer for the project. They came back after we had been meeting. They went out and they said, yes, everything is in place, everything is where it's supposed to be. They're going back now that the pavement is down and everything, all of the standpipes and stuff are now connected. So they're going back to checked off that box that those things have been done.
But that's their engineer, right?
That's their
So
engineer.
who for the town is making
Our
sure that this
engineering
is up to
department
snuff?
signed off that the big system is in the ground, that the pipes are there.
And they've taken, I mean, we discussed this, I think, at our last meeting, so this shouldn't be news. I
Our-
mean, they took a look and said that this is functioning the way that it's
Yes.
supposed to be. And
It
it's
is
resolving
functioning.
all
They're
of the
not saying
flooding
that it's
issues.
functioning the way it's supposed to be because it isn't paved until today. The pavement finished today.
They had to block the drains with hay bales because of the mud.
Right.
They have to raise, the road gets raised up to the top of the catch basins.
So there's been an active decision that we should not seek an independent third-party peer review of this, and our town engineer is going to take on that responsibility.
They have to this point. If this board said that they wanted an independent person to do that, after their engineer signs off that this is what he designed, then you would send it out to the peer review.
So the question I have as a sort of follow-up to that is, it was designed based upon a certain plan, right? But that plan is different now because there's a lot more disturbed area. So is that original design still appropriate for the given conditions? I think maybe that's what you're
exactly
looking
what,
for?
yes. And I kind of feel like every meeting we come and we have this conversation, and I don't know if we're making any progress. And I understand the point about we need to pave the roads so that we can have an accurate assessment, but exactly what you just said, Cheryl, is what my concern has been. And I feel like it's taking on an awful lot of responsibility for the town, for our town engineer, to make that assessment.
For their engineer, it's
So could we go back and ask, I know Lisa's not in the area, but could we at least ask her if there were a material change in the conditions of the site? I mean, maybe she could tell us what's a material change. I don't know. I'm just saying maybe it is.
Well, Bill had another peer reviewer that he had talked about at the last meeting.
Yeah, I
that
think
guess
Lisa's
Alex
gone. I think
knew,
we have
or-
to.
Lisa's gone. John Thompson's going to provide another
But
name.
that's what we said last meeting.
I can't take and push him to do it. I
I
can
know, you
ask.
said to Alex that
and
you
I've
had
asked
a
and
name of
asked.
somebody that he knew and he's
Yep.
worked with before. So we know who this person is.
And I've asked him to look at it. I asked last time if we could use another person, and it would be the woman who did Brushwood. That's Deb Keller. She's familiar with the area. She's here anyways to do the other.
Cost?
Do what?
That's what we said.
applicant's
at the-
cost?
The other part
That's
to
the
that.
two meetings.
The other part to that was, Mr. McKenna was going to pay for it. Mr. McKenna still hasn't answered that question, but
Well, so
I think that's the bigger issue.
He's going to have to.
He is going to have to.
If he wants his permit, he's going to pay for it.
Right. I mean, until he gets the landscaping plan approved, he's not going to have a saleable project because the building inspector is not going to certify that the project has been completed and that occupancy permits can be issued. At least that's what the building inspector says. And they would sell the units at their peril if they had no occupancy permit.
Someone buy them at their peril even more.
But I think that it makes a good point that it's because of the additional disturbance is the original drainage an adequate design? So we're going to need that question to be answered. And you can ask the applicant's engineer to make an initial stab at it because he is an engineer and is stamping the plans and or is signing off on the plans and presumably will,
I wanted you to finish your sentence.
well, he presumably will say what he thinks is right because, he's
He needs
an
to sign an
engineer
as-built.
and he's a professional, and if he says something that's crazy wrong, he's likely to pay for it.
He has to stamp the as-built, and there's no as-built at this time. It's his stamp on the as-built.
Should the peer review ideally be done before the paving?
The paving's done now.
I know it's done now, but we've been trying to get the peer review, and I don't know what
6 weeks probably.
what the implication
Peer
of
review's
that.
going to review the plans.
The plans more
and
so than
the conditions,
the actual.
as opposed to, I think, as opposed to reviewing the actual system for compliance with the plans. That's what
Okay.
John Thompson can do.
Right. The question, I think,
Peer review's going to review the materials.
there's a couple of things. We wanted to have
Okay.
the system as it's designed be complete so that it can be functioning. Second question is to confirm the adequacy of it, given the changes in the site, right?
Right, that's key. And
So to wait for not do anything to it until that peer review's done would just delay getting it functioning, which I think was the
Well, and you
concern,
might have
right?
to rip everything back up again.
I mean, it's a risk, but I mean,
the other question, has Mr. Udi seen the peer review? The one that, I just saw the one from
Well, you've
2015?
got Lisa Eggleston's 2015 peer review as part of our plans. She did it in 2015. She reviewed the drainage, and if you don't have it, you can get it.
I have it.
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to be...
We're just saying that there has been a peer review, but the point that's been made is that because the disturbance is greater than it was anticipated on the original plan, maybe the drainage isn't adequate.
If I may, through the chair, my understanding was that Ms. Eggleston's peer review was simply saying that it did not concern whether or not this drainage system worked. It hadn't been installed yet. No ground had been broken on it. It was a peer review of the plans at the time.
Right.
I think what we're more concerned about is that this drainage system is as installed, potentially because we have concerns that certain layers, like it's supposed to have a layer of filter fabric on top in the leaching field, which no one saw that was installed, and it's now sitting under 4 feet of dirt. We don't think it's there. We could be wrong. We wanted someone to look at not only the things that you're talking about, but to see if the system actually was installed properly, because we have concerns about it.
But there's 4 feet of dirt on top of it.
So someone should get a shovel and dig down and see if there's filter fabric.
That's what our engineering department signed off on.
They said that it's there.
They said they signed off on that system,
But it
that
was
field.
installed properly?
according to the plans.
Per the plan, they signed off on it.
Sorry, Bill. Sorry, I just have to. They signed off on the plan.
No, what's in
the
the
work
ground.
is inconsistent with the plan. You're just,
Thank you.
Okay.
Consistent with the plan.
Well, I mean, if they signed off on it, they signed off on it.
Is there a report that they provided you, or is
They
this
did
all
not.
verbal?
They told me that they signed off on it.
Do they have a same kind of sign-off system as the building department does, where there's a actual card and they have to put
No.
the date? They don't do that?
They may do it in their office. They don't have a card that sits on site. No.
If I may, to the chair, can I ask a few questions about some of the things we've been talking about?
Sure.
It was mentioned earlier that by Mr. Clark, that there is a landscaper and an arborist involved. Do you guys know who these people are?
No.
So, let me.
You know who the arborist is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Who?
Doug Hunt.
Oh, okay.
So Doug Hunt is their arborist
Yes.
and our peer review arborist?
Yeah, so with respect,
Not our peer review.
I'm very frustrated.
It's not on this one?
Through the chair, I'm very frustrated by this. I don't hold anyone here. I'm just frustrated because this is what we've been dealing with this developer since day one. Someone who does not care, and this is my pure opinion, anything what this board says. Your opinion said that he had to find people that had to be pre-approved by this board to do this. He could care less. He didn't do that. He's building out this site. No one's holding him accountable. He's paving roads. He's building out the houses. He's knocking down more trees, doing site work, doing whatever he wants. And your order, which is dated a month ago, says, and I quote, "The planning board shall approve the choice of the surveyor, drainage engineer, and landscape architect as consultants." Mr. Clark knows that because he is the town planner, yet he is allowing this guy to just pick and choose who he wants, and who are these people? You don't even know who they are. You're just told tonight it's Mr. Hunt, the guy who's being paid as a litigation expert for this gentleman. You talk about CEC, the original engineer, approving these plans. They're the engineering firm who's done 30 to 50 jobs with this guy, it's his personal engineer, who stamped the original plans, sheet 2, that were wrong, that lied to you about where all the trees were. This is like Keystone Cops. This is nonsensical to me. And when you guys issue a well-reasoned opinion that you work, I know what it's like to be on a planning board. I'm on my planning board. You work long hours at your job. You come here till 10 o'clock at night, bleary-eyed, to deal with this stuff. You craft a very detailed order that is in plain English and unambiguous, and then you give it to your town planner to do this. I'm sorry I'm getting emotional about this because I've been living with this case now for over a year. And you tell the developer who's massively building out these units in the town of Milton, please do these things. And it's like Keystone Cops. He's using Doug Hunter, CEC, or some guy signed off, but there's no document, and someone told. It makes no sense. And I would strongly urge this board to do what's within your power to require this guy to attend to what you ordered him to do a month ago. He could care less about this.
He's not going to get a occupancy permit unless he performs to our satisfaction.
I don't disagree, but he's already, the way he's performing your order is by hiring his own people in cahoots with the town planning office, but that's what he's doing, and getting a blessing to do that. When you say you guys have to approve these people, and they should be independent, because his own gang of guys are going to rubber stamp whatever he does. He should hire independent people that don't have anything to do with him financially or anything to carry this out.
Let's think it out. The engineer is going to say the system's fine, and we're going to hire someone to take a look at the system. So we're going to do that.
But are we? Because that's not what I've heard.
Look, the fact of the matter is, until we approve that landscaping plan, there's no site plan approval. And
who's doing it?
What?
Who's doing the plan? His paid expert? How do you know it's right?
Well, as I just said, without a survey, we won't.
Look, how do we know it's right? There's going to be a survey, and the surveyor is going to stamp it.
But Bill told us that they're working on their plan without a survey.
Well,
listen, Alex.
Once we get the plan, we're going to get to look at it. And but the planting season we've got another month or so. If we don't plant it, if it doesn't get planted this fall, it's going to have to wait till the spring, and that's in no one's interest. In my view, it's in no one's interest. Maybe it is in someone's interest. The fact that they've continued to work rather than stop, I don't think is all that terrible. I personally think that putting the binder coat down was something that had to be done.
So
That's what I personally feel.
I don't disagree with you, but I need to see that our town is taking steps concurrently to address these issues, and I don't feel that we are. I mean, this is the third consecutive meeting where I've brought up the issue of peer review for the stormwater, and I just keep getting brushed off. And then the conversation resets every 2 weeks.
He hasn't agreed to pay for it, so
but we
there's
also
no way we can do it.
don't have a name of someone, which is the third or fourth meeting that I've specifically said, when are we going to have a peer reviewer? No names. Maybe some lady named something somewhere that you might know. I don't disagree with Mr. Udi's comments that I feel like this is a free-for-all. I don't feel like we're putting the steps. We're not taking steps forward either on the town's management of this project. We can't be held responsible for what the developer is going to do. There's going to be bad actors in the world, but we darn well have to be responsible for our response to it. And I don't feel like it's been taken very seriously. Not by this board, by the staff.
The way the site plan approval was initially proposed, or the way it gets proposed, is the developer comes in with a landscaping plan, and then the board reviews the landscaping plan and requires whatever changes the board requires. And if the plan is inadequate in any respect, the board can require that it be changed. I mean, getting a landscaping plan is in the board's interest. And you're right, we didn't approve the landscaper, but we certainly have to approve the plan. And we've got some talent on this board that can review a landscaping plan, and if it is not properly surveyed, or if we don't like the planting as proposed, then we can change it.
So we're taking the position that they didn't follow what our order said, and we're okay with it. That they need to run it by us, who they're going to hire.
I mean, the order said they had to do certain things. They're doing certain other things.
Yeah.
They're doing certain other things. If the landscape plan comes in, we can always approve the landscaper.
But our order, Alex, says the planning board shall approve the choice of a surveyor, drainage engineer, and landscape architect as consultants, and will require their attendance at least one meeting.
Right, but it doesn't, I mean, I personally want to get this project done. I don't want to just, I want to get it done. I want that thing to be landscaped. I want the damage that they've done to be addressed, and I want it to happen. I don't want it to just be kicked down till next spring.
So I totally agree with you, and I think everybody here shares that opinion. But my point is, a month ago we issued the order. We've had 2 meetings since then. We could have had somebody on board.
Town council would have to sue him to get compliance. That's the only, I mean, where
So then we
do you...
issued an order that we knew they weren't going to comply with?
We didn't know they weren't going to comply. They haven't complied. But they are doing things which are designed to get this project to an end point. And if what they do is not satisfactory, we will reject it. And that is, I mean, all we wanted was a proper plan. That was what this order was designed to get. If we get a proper plan, you know, I think that we've accomplished something. I have my fingers crossed about it. If we don't get it, then we tell them you're just out of luck.
If I may, through the chair.
Well, no, I've got Mr. Clark.
Thank you. I've given the amended order to the building inspector. He's the one that has to enforce it. I've given it to him. He understands it too. The way we were reading it is that they need to go and do numbers 1 through 4. Then there shall be an approval of the surveyor, the engineer. And if you disagree with the things that they're saying, I know there's going to be a peer review of the stormwater issues that are there, or the engineering. Is this plan what's on the ground? Is this plan identifying where the tree lines are? Is it identifying where the houses are? Are you going to let them do the work, or are you going to pick their people for them and tell them this is the person you have to use to do your project?
Well, with all due respect, they had their own engineers to begin with who perhaps are overlapping now, and that plan wasn't correct either, and we took that at face value.
That's not something that I follow. That's something that Joe may look at the plan and say, well, and he's already had a dispute with how this board read the plan, how Mr. Udy reads the plan, and he came back and gave you a number of how many trees he felt had come down. He's given you that letter. He's come back and he's also made statements of if they're going to take and put utilities in, this is how they would have to do it. So he didn't feel that there was a clear cutting of the site. Did X amount of trees come down that shouldn't have? Yes. Did some trees that, were identified, some were identified, some were not.
Yes, so we don't know how many trees came down. So to say that we identified a number of trees, we don't know.
He came up with a number, he put it in the letter
22 trees
Two
or
here.
something. Yes, but how did he come up with the number? This has been discussed before. We have no idea. It's a guess.
Can I pass out, this is a before and after aerial of the area. If you could take one of each before and after, just to give a sense.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment, please?
1 second. We've done, no, why don't you're passing around before and afters.
Yeah.
Any particular comments on them?
These are just Google
The fact
Earth
that there's
maps.
a lot of what appears to be clear cutting.
Multiple-sided, sorry.
Oh, they are? Okay, sorry.
Oh, no, they're multiple-sided the wrong way.
There are far more than 22 trees that were removed. If you look at A as the before and B as the after, you can see that this was clear cut, not a tree standing. I mean, and you can see it's a massive amount of trees, and we know that there are specimen trees all around here. This is a serious level of clear cutting. There's absolutely no doubt when you look at the extensive nature of this. So I think this goes back to one of the first questions that Brian asked at one of the first meetings, which was, at what point did Bill realize that the plans do not match the site, and that the specifics, the number of trees and so on and so forth? So that's a question I have, because I know that you visited the site on numerous occasions, and so just the question that has come up before, I'm wondering if you, Bill, recall or would be able to say when you noticed the plan that was provided by the developer did not match the site.
I actually have a problem with your images here. If they were at the same scale, I don't think that you'd say, on A, you see houses. Those houses are on Truman Highway. They're not on B.
This is the same.
The scale is still different.
The scale's a little bit different, but you can see in the before, you can see it's densely packed with trees. It's forested.
It's a forested area, but at the same time, you had to create that huge drainage system over on the right.
So the question, though, is if you're on the site, it's something that Brian picked up pretty quickly when he visited the site, the plan doesn't match the reality of the site. The number of trees,
Well, the one, the question...
Could you give him an opportunity to answer the question? Sure. I would like to know at what point he realized that the plans were inaccurate.
I don't know that I felt that they were inaccurate. I don't think that by looking at this and saying that this area here, that you couldn't do anything but take out those trees, knowing how deep and how large that hole is. Taking out this area here and this one here for the two foundations, and then putting in the pipes that are coming down. This is a road that's coming in here. So I know that there's X amount of utilities in that road. The amount of utilities that are coming from the back of this house, right across the back of this house, and all connecting into that field. The difference in the elevation between the two houses. So I don't know that I think that there is an excess of vegetation removal. I don't think that it's a clear cut of the site. When you have cuts as severe as what we're in here, I don't see that.
One of the things I think that came up at one of the other meetings is that when we looked at the plan that had the trees on it, I think the planning board, and I was on it when we did it, didn't recognize that what we were looking at wasn't actually an existing conditions survey, and perhaps in hindsight, what we should have asked for is someone to put their stamp on it that those are the trees that actually exist in the locations that they are. So that sort of maybe was something as a lesson learned moving forward. I think we've been learning from each of our special permits, and I'd like to suggest that this one, has a lot of things that we should consider how we might improve our processes in terms of our review and in terms of the review at the building department once it's under construction. Because, in that plan, I mean, there's no reason that Bill or we shouldn't have a distrust of what we're seeing is not accurate, right? We should be relying upon it. I know as an architect, when I put forth information and I put my stamp on it, I am certifying my work that I have put before people. So
I agree.
No building department, I mean, otherwise you have to, find that surveyor was negligent.
We should distrust it now.
We should distrust it now.
Right. We need to distrust it.
No, but so what we have to ask for is when we get a plan that's an existing condition survey, which is going to be the basis for a tree preservation plan, we have to ask the surveyor to put their stamp on and certify to us that is an accurate depiction of the trees of a certain caliber that are on the site. And then what we have to do is make sure that it's staked, like we did at Woodmere, and say, go out and stake it and say, this is the limit of your work. If you go beyond the limit of that work, then the building official should be able to readily see it, right?
That's fine, but I'm talking about for this application and for what we need to do on the go forward, because we have two issues we need to solve here as a community. One is this project and where do we go and how do we get it built by November, and the second is what do we do to fix the problem.
I'm just responding to whether something's accurate or not based on
I agree. So all I'm saying is we're going to get a plan from someone and we're going to get a survey from someone. I don't care if it's stamped or not, Cheryl. I want it peer reviewed at this point because I don't trust their stamp. He stamped a bunch of plans, and half of them were probably wrong, and we probably should go after his license or at least investigate it. And we probably should go after his errors in emissions assurance and a bunch of other things. But for right now, as we're putting forward a path to get this thing done, because that's what everybody in this room wants, I think we need to be realistic and say, I don't think we can trust anything that comes out of this developer anymore.
All I'm responding to is to say that we shouldn't blame Bill for knowing that a plan was for not knowing that a plan was inaccurate. Just like we shouldn't be blamed that the plan was inaccurate, that we relied upon.
We relied on a plan, but now we can't rely on it anymore.
Agreed.
Okay.
But Cheryl, would you consider that site clear cut?
I believe they cut more trees than we thought they were going to cut.
They didn't file the tree protection plan. They didn't do anything they were supposed to do.
And there's a lot of things that I think, like I said, again, sort of a going forward basis. There's different ways to do these storm retention systems and that I've become aware of that can be smaller footprints with therefore resulting in less site disturbance in terms of horizontal. They might go deeper.
When this board signs a special permit, though, it's out of our hands. It's gone. And we have to be able to rely on our town staff to follow up those plans and make sure that those conditions are met and those permits are honored.
That's the process improvement that I referred to.
And that's right. We need to look towards that, but not that. We absolutely have to demand that, and that has to happen, frankly, before we issue another major special permit with conditions. We need to demand that from our town. But right now, we also have to figure out how to solve the situation with the applicant sitting at the table.
Can I just make one comment before you? So there's plenty of best practices for permitting. This was put out by the state in 2007. We're doing basically nothing in here. Process improvements, absolutely. My problem with this is not that we're not the most up-to-date community as far as best practices. My problem with this is that we had requirements in the special permit, that there were supposed to be filings. That's not a process improvement. That's that we didn't collect those filings. And that's part of the problem that we have here.
But we have to be clear about who the person or the town officials are who are responsible for that.
So I don't even know. I've asked that before. So Joe Prondak was responsible for making sure that we had the landscaping plan, Bill? Is that true?
You should
I feel like I've asked this before and I can't get any answers.
To get a building permit, that's what you need to do.
You should not have issued the building permit without it.
I mean, that's a major problem. That's not going to be solved with a new process improvement. That's somebody who works for us isn't looking at the permit and following what the board instructed.
Right, and I think we need the town administrator to come in and talk to us about what we're going to do about that.
You know, part of our problem is this developer, because most developers...
There's no doubt.
Well,
I need to push back on this.
Most developers, a good developer will follow the plans, will follow the requirements, because the developer will realize that it's easier for the developer to do what he's supposed to do than not do what he's supposed to do. And this developer came in with a piece of machinery that was far too big for the job, and has not done a good job.
This project illustrated a lot of deficiencies in the process, but I am a developer, and I'll tell you right now, the devil's in the details, and the last 10% of the work is where most of the mistakes are going to be made. And that's where you're going to cheat when you can cheat, because that's when you're running out of money and you're running out of time and you want to get done. And that's where you need to enforce.
This guy cheated right at the beginning.
I know. He started right from the beginning.
So that was going to be my pushback. So I work with developers every day too, and every single person I work for follows the letter of the law and does great things. But that's not what government is necessarily. I mean, our government is set up to make sure we're protecting citizens from the bad actors, which are going to come. And we need to be prepared and professional enough to recognize it and say no and stop it. And we didn't here. We just kept going along with it. That's what my problem is.
And I agree.
All right. At some point, we're going to let Mr. Ute to say a few words, because he's been dutifully raising his hands for the last 10 minutes.
I won't interrupt.
This is the conclusory kind of, look, guys, don't let this developer off the hook for what you required. Every step of the way, when this board has issued an order, he has played fast and loose with what you guys issued, because he knows he can do it. No construction management plan. That was in your special permit. No tree protection plan. All this stuff he just ignores in the hopes that between the various departments of whatever, the town, that it'll get lost in the shuffle. So how do we go forward and solve this problem? Mr. Chairman, you suggested, well, we'll get a plan, and we'll look at the plan real good, and we'll make sure that the plan's good. The only problem is, I'd say this respectfully, you know, he has submitted plans to this board before that has passed through. And I'll read from your own recent order from August. This is what you guys wrote. In applying for site plan approval, applicant Brush Hill Mansions LLC, the developer, did not include the landscaping plan required by the special permit application. Sheet 2 of the plan submitted has been conceded to be inaccurate with respect to trees existing in 2015, and also does not identify trees with caliper between 8 and 10 inches, which were intended to be preserved. A document produced late last night entitled Planting Plan, dated November 16, 2016, by MKA Landscape Architects, is largely conceptual. Contours of the land are not shown. Existing trees are not accurately cited, and their sizes are not noted. These are the plans that this guy is submitting from his gaggle of Keystone Cop people. You need to require him. He had since August. He could have, the day after your last meeting, gone out, given you some names for independent people. You could have interviewed them, approved them. You need independent people here. I'm sympathetic.
He's going to give us the names of his surveyor. He's going to give us the name of his
guys.
It may be, but we will ask them to submit their credentials, and we'll determine if they're approvable.
You want to get this done by November. I understand that, but don't sacrifice.
It's not going to get done by November if we do that.
You alluded to the planting season. He had August 14th, you issued your order. He didn't do anything. Look, you have to have him get independent. Let me finish, please, Mr. Chairman. You have to, my recommendation to this board, you can ignore it if you wish, but every step of the way, he's used his own people and shirked what you required him to do. Now he's doing the same thing, and you're letting him get away with it.
This is the building inspector's job, not our job.
But it's in your order.
Well, and the building inspector is supposed to enforce the order.
Well, but you're suggesting that he can do it and bring the plan to you, and hopefully it'll all work out. I mean, that's not the same thing, Mr. Chairman. It's saying, Mr. Building Inspector, we ordered this. He's ignoring us. Do something about it. In the meantime, he's being allowed to just build away.
You heard what Mr. Clark said, that his reading of this and the building inspector's reading of it was that they would get their approval down the line.
How does it make any? It doesn't make any sense. You'd have 3, 4 experts.
Look, I know what
Can I finish?
know what it says.
It says have 4 experts do these plans. So you want them to do the plans and then approve if the expert's okay after that? That makes no sense.
No, it's been done before. In any event,
My prediction is we're going to be right back here with the same
if the board
problems.
wants to kick this over to the spring, we certainly can do it. And if your people want to kick it over to the spring, we certainly can do
Just
it.
want it done right.
Well, we want it done right too.
Well, it's not being done right, and you're letting them not do
What
it.
are you saying is being done wrong?
If you let me speak, I will tell you.
On the ground.
He is supposed to, according to your order, there's been many things done wrong on the ground. You've already said so in your orders, and we provided expert reports to show you that. What's being done wrong on the ground right now is he's supposed to have independent people pre-approved by this board, analyze all the things that he did wrong. He's ignored that. He's hired his own people to do it, and that seems like it's okay, and that's not what your order says.
He has ignored it, and he has been told that he's been told what the right thing to do is, and he isn't doing it. And what do? Shut down the project?
Yeah. Yeah,
well,
that's what you do.
If that's
How many chances do you get?
If that's what you want, we've got it. We hear it. I don't think that's the right way to proceed.
Well, what leverage do we have to make him do the right thing? How many chances do you get?
No occupancy permit.
But that's not what you suggested earlier. If he does this plan through his guy, and maybe it's okay, how do you know if it's accurate? He's already presented you with 2
Because we're going to have it verified.
By who?
By someone.
Who? The whole point of this system that you set up was to have an independent person do the work, so you don't have to have another person verify.
I understand it, and he was supposed to pay for it too.
He's ignoring you, as he's done since the beginning.
He's ignoring us, and he's not paying for it, but he is getting work done.
I'd just like to suggest, respectfully, I think I understand your position. I'd like the board to be able to now decide what we, as a board, would like to do with it. Thank you.
Can I just, 2 things concern me about part of this. I share all of April's concerns about the peer review. I, too, was shocked that we're having this discussion and it's as if we're having it for the first time. It makes me a little crazy. But, you know, Mr. Udy has brought up concerns about fabric in the stormwater system, and it makes sense to me. There's supposed to be fabric. There's great concerns that there aren't fabric. I think I've seen images that it was getting buried with dirt without fabric, so there's real concern about that. And then I'm concerned that we're counting on a town engineer's general verbal sign-off. I just think that isn't reassuring at this point, given all of these sort of loose sign-offs. You know, I'm concerned that I look at this and it's clear-cut, and Bill doesn't remember when he realized the plans weren't accurate. Perhaps he doesn't even acknowledge that they're inaccurate, even though we've gone over this a number of times, and he sort of says, well, maybe, you know, kind of says, what I heard was, perhaps clear-cutting was necessary here, which brings us back to the Linda Meach question.
I don't think I said it was clear-cut at all.
You're saying it's not clear-cutting, but you're saying perhaps this level of taking down trees is possibly necessary? You think that was necessary?
No, I think it went over, but I don't believe that it is a clear cut of the site when you look at the amount of cut and fill that was added to the site.
Okay. It was made clear in public meetings to the neighborhoods that this was not going to be clear-cut. This level of cutting, there was a promise made to the public and to the neighbors that came to the public hearings. There's a level of public trust that has been lost. And tonight, when you had the opportunity to regain some of that public trust by responding to Linda Meach's thoughtful question, which Alex gave you another 2 weeks to come up with a response, nothing?
He didn't give me 2 weeks to come up with another thought.
She asked you over 2 weeks ago.
Yesterday?
No, she asked him in the public meeting. He said,
she asked
Bill
me
will
for
respond.
that.
Bill will respond
he asked me
in 2
for
weeks.
a written response that I did not have for tonight.
Well, actually, I just asked for a response. I thought you were going to prepare presentation.
I would have given a verbal response. I did not have a written response for you.
If I indicated I needed a written response, I thought I would get a report on it, but I thought the board would get a report on it. But you've indicated, we'll get a report.
Well, why can't we have one now, though?
What?
Why can't we have one now?
How many
Bill?
trees came down?
No, that wasn't the question, was it? No. I thought her question
Why was the site clear cut?
Yes.
And I said, I don't believe the site was clear cut. I believe that there were excess trees taken down. Between the amount of cut and fill for these foundations, because the majority of these, actually all three of these houses have walkout basements. So they start here, they end down here. For the amount of drainage system
I'm sorry,
that
this
is
isn't
behind.
answering the real question. The real question was
The
that
amount of trees that get taken down and why so many trees got taken down in and around each one of the properties.
Yeah, Cheryl.
why
guys-
was a verbal permission granted to the developer that went against what the planning board public process discussion was?
What verbal approval?
There was a verbal approval given according to the developer.
No.
That's what he said.
Well, guys, listen, I am uncomfortable with the tenor of this discussion right now. I would like to get to a resolution of what we want like to go forward and how we want to make improvements in our processes. I think there could be a lot of blame to go around with a lot of people here. There's unfortunate circumstances here, but it's not going to get us to a better solution. Would you like to speak? Alex, would you like to hear from, I'm sorry, you're one of the neighbors, I remember, but I don't remember your name.
Yeah, well, come on up and join us.
Thanks. Julie Penchamsing, Barakat, 366 Truman Parkway. And I'm hearing everybody. I'm very pleased that folks are here at this planning board are so concerned and very interested in what's happening at 333, what happened at 333. And the fact is, my property is right behind one of these developments, and the trees were all taken out. My property is impacted. I wrote a letter, you read it. My property is impacted. I have trees that are halfway falling, some of them, because of, I believe, what happened over there with the uprooting of those trees. I've had so much water damage coming down the side of my property, damaging my driveway. And yeah, this developer has not responded. I tried to send him a lawyer letter. Of course, it was a joke to him, so he just never responded. And my family and I, and like so many other families that you're talking about, at least some folks knew this was happening. We never even got notice on the Truman Parkway side, none of us, that this was happening. So we were sort of left out of the whole deal. But nevertheless, we trust you guys to do the right thing. And it sounds to me like with this fella, doing the right thing is not... He's holding. You've given away your power. You've given the town has given away, whether it's Joe Prondiak or whether it's this board or whomever, to a very wealthy, well-connected developer, and small citizens like myself are paying the price because I have a damaged driveway. I have fallen trees. I'll have to pay to get those, removed. I have a lot of things that I will have to do because of the effects of this guy who just didn't care, just wanted to disobey all of your instructions and do it his way to get it done. And I like what Brian said. It's coming down to the end of the road here. This is when you need to really have him under the microscope and make sure that whatever you've asked him to do and that these folks have recommended, that it's done. Because I understand the frustration and wanted it to just say, okay, at least he's doing something. I hear banging up there. I hear gravel going down. I know they've done some work with trying to do some leveling. They're trying to do something, yeah. And so, yeah, we could breathe. They're doing something, but it's not enough, and it's not right that they should get away with doing it improperly. And, just please do keep that in mind. Make them do it right. We didn't do it right from the beginning. We have an opportunity now to make them do it right. And let's not blame anybody. I wanted to do that. It doesn't help. Let's just make this done the right way for all of us.
So just while you're here, so Alex, on the question of, getting it done. I mean, if, as you said, you would like to see it get done, you said November because of landscaping. My concern is if we, what our options are. If he chooses not to follow the order, the options are to stop work and to sue him. Are those really are those the last options we have as a town?
Well, I suppose we can say that we don't like the way it's going. We don't think you should use your own landscape architect. We don't think you should use your own engineer. We've got some names that the board has approved. We've got to approve some names first, and maybe people have recommendations as to who we should hire. But once we come up with a landscape architect who's willing to do what we say, because presumably he wouldn't work with the developer, or would he work with it? We'd hire the architect to work with the developer, but it would be our architect. In any event, when we get these people on board in 3 to 4 weeks, they can get to work, and sometime next spring, you will, of course, suffer from the fact that the land will not have been adequately stabilized.
We hired the architects and the engineers if the
we
applicant,
can't hire them if we have no money.
If the contractor doesn't agree to pay for those consultants, where are the funds coming from to pay for those consultants?
I actually have a quick question on that because
I'm just really want to understand the real solutions
But this is important
we have.
because I think it might answer your question, because I had a separate complaint come in to me today on a separate issue, and I was involved in correspondence back and forth with Mr. Dennehy on it. And I learned that there was a $105,000 cash deposit on the Boyle estate, the Beechwood property, from the developer that I believe the town is still holding, but I don't know for sure. In any case, there was $105,000 that the town required him to deposit. That wasn't in our order. That was a town order that he contributed, I think.
That was the bond in lieu of, that was his bond, wasn't it?
Bond.
No, just the pavement.
It's just a pavement bond.
A bond for the pavement.
Yeah.
So my question is, if we require that of all developers, has this developer submitted a similar bond? And could we use that money to go in and stabilize the site now? Just go in and do whatever we have to do to stabilize the site for the winter and figure out this mess.
But then who is the we? The town?
Yeah, send the town engineer there. If we have $200,000 in the bank, go
do we take
spend it.
responsibility for the drainage problems or storm
We don't have a
drainage?
bond on these people because
It's a driveway.
it's a driveway. It's a trust. I think there's a trust document. The other was that was before you decided to go for bonds. There's extenuating circumstances on the one up there for the roadway. That's
That
something.
come after the fact because they didn't do their work to
They
get a
didn't
CO.
do certain things. They wanted sign off, and the only way
So we got a cash
I
payment to get
negotiated with our engineering department to go back and for the neighbors, how do we get a roadway down there? We came up with something. That's how we got the money for the roadway.
So that answers my question. We don't have any
I just
money.
wanted to really be very concrete about what our options are. Our options are, from what I understand, ask Joe Prondak to shut the site down until we hire independent people that we may have to figure out how we pay for because this developer won't pay for.
And how we determine their qualifications.
So that's sort of if we say we don't trust the developer, anybody he's worked with, that's what our option is.
Your own document says the foregoing requirements are an interim condition for amended site plan approval, and failure of Brush Hill Mansions LLC to comply with these requirements shall constitute a material breach of site plan approval. The building commissioner is required to report to the board regarding compliance with this interim order. Once the necessary consultant reports have been received, a final amended site plan approval will be issued. Compliance with that final site plan approval will be necessary before the development can be considered complete and available for occupancy.
Do we have any idea, Bill, if we did pull work today, if we said stop, what condition the site is in from a drainage standpoint now that the binder's down? Do you have any idea from John Thompson if the thing is going to continue to shed water, or if it's going to start to drain right so we could get through the winter, or at least to the part where the water freezes?
His engineer said before the road was down, he wanted the site hydroseeded. They have not hydroseeded the site. I keep pushing them for finishing the hydroseeding because you need it to stop the water running off to Truman Highway into Brush Hill Road. It's not my job to follow up with them and tell them, go do the landscaping, but it's a case of when he calls me to ask me a question, it's like, did you do it? No. Well, you know that your own engineer is telling you to do it. You have to do it. It's on their schedule to do next week, but it's already taken them 2 to 3 weeks.
And the reality is, the landscaping plan is not going to get executed this year. We have 2 more meetings.
It might not be the trees, but the grass could get down.
I agree, the grass can get down.
Put the grass down.
That's my point. That's my point. We're not going to get the landscaping plan approved before the October 12th meeting, and they won't even be able to get stock at that point. So, the board could take the position. I think we should probably have had John Thompson here to say, how do we get the site stabilized to get through the next 6 months so that this neighbor doesn't have water pouring into her property for the next 6 months and trees aren't falling down all winter. Get it stable, because we're going to need 6 months to get through this. This guy has completely lied to this board over and over and over again, and I'm not going to trust his plan. I'm just not. I don't even know if I trust our ability to enforce his plan once it's done. But I certainly I'm not going to trust his plan.
Well, in terms of once it's done, I mean, the way all plans and all building permits get finalized is the building department has to say that through their inspections that what's been built is in accordance with the plans and with the codes. So the plans include the special permit. So the big item over this developer's head and the incentive to do what we've asked, obviously, is that he won't get his occupancy permits, which means he can't sell them, and he's going to be out figuring out how he's paying for all this in the meantime. I just would ask people to really consider, when you have somebody walk away from a site and you have lawsuits flying around and nothing's going to get done for a lot more than 4 months. It'll be years. Is that the outcome people are really looking for?
No, I mean, we're dangerously close to having this developer walk away from the site. Just pack up his stuff and drive away. I'm sure it's in an LLC. There's probably a defense. I don't even know if there's any judgment. He's probably judgment proof.
It is a judgment proof LLC, but we take what we're given, and if we're given a good landscaping plan, we can tell if it's a good landscaping plan. It'll be.
We can't tell if it's accurate.
Of course we can. We'll go at it. You take the plan and you verify that it's accurate. I mean, that's not the end of the.
Well, through the GIS, they can definitely get the GIS can do and get the satellite of where the trees have been removed. You can get a general idea whether that survey, which is showing where the trees are, is relatively accurate in terms of the perimeter.
Well, that's a clean slate. That's what
Alan has a program that actually can go backwards to pull where those trees are.
But the bigger concern that I have in terms of the accuracy is if there are trees that are at the perimeter that are unhealthy now because they're not part of that big grouping of trees or stand of trees. I think the testimony or comments that we received before. So someone should really look at and say, if the trees that are around around the perimeter of the, with the abutting properties, that's where that plan, I think we said that there needs to be attention to that landscape plan, that it may be off of their property, it may be on someone else's property, and that has to be negotiated. But that might be part of the ultimate solution in terms of the fact that she lost trees on her property and she's going to have to pay, that this developer would have to take responsibility. It would be part of what would be required before he got his occupancy.
I do know that Doug Hunt is actually working with the landscape architect to replace X amount of trees. Those trees that were in the middle that are now on the edge, do they need to have something to buffer them?
Right.
What's the protection that is required? That's what the two of them are supposed to be figuring out now.
So it is addressing the concerns of...
It has not gone off-site, but that if you wanted to go off-site, then...
Well, I think it should be looked at for sure.
There should also be a tree screen for 295 Brush Hill Road, because without it, the lights of the garage on one of the units is going to be right in the window of the people who live at 295. There should be a tree screen. So that's one thing I'm looking for when the plan comes out.
Just super quick to address a point that you just made, something totally different than what I spoke to earlier. You talk about leverage on the developer that this board could have, given the enforcement issues that you're weighing. One, obviously, is the occupancy permits, but two, and I don't have the specifics in front of me, but I believe at a certain date and time, these development rights that the developer has will expire. And when that happens, you can ask your own town council about this to get an opinion. My understanding is, as a matter of law, these units that have not yet been built out or phased in go back to become common area and owned by the condominium association. So he has to finish this properly within a certain period of time. I don't know off the top of my head what that is, but that is another thing that is, I think, weighing on this developer that I believe this board can use, if it so chooses, to make him do things correctly. Because delay for this developer, I don't think, is good under those circumstances. I'm not suggesting that anything be done to intentionally delay the developer. We just want him to do it right. But not only are occupancy permits an issue, I think also he has a certain amount of time to develop these units and phase them in. So,
I have a question. Do you guys do a letter to him stating these are the things we want you to do and by this date? Does he get that regularly?
Do we what?
The developer, does he get a letter stating, what
No, it's usually not, it's the building inspector who sends the letters.
We give it to the building inspector, and the building inspector conveys all the expectations.
We say what he wants, what we want him to do, and he supposedly does it. But
And is there that piece in there that you may, what did you say, that may not be allowed to have your final permit?
Occupancy permit?
Yeah, can that be added in that letter?
He's well aware of that.
He knows?
Oh, yeah, that's been brought up at every meeting.
This interim order on the amended site plan approval was directly sent to Mr. McKenna. I know he has it.
I have a couple of items.
Anyway, thank you.
One is that we're going to have a 5-year follow-up period for the landscaping that we approve, and that's going to be something that is, getting the landscaping plan is just what we need as soon as we can get it. I personally would approve Doug Hunt as the arborist. I think he's a good arborist, and I think that I would definitely approve it. Don't know who the landscape architect is. I think any surveyor worth his salt is going to survey properly, because it isn't worth his license.
He's stamping every plan.
Not survey. I mean, if you fudge a survey, you got a problem. So that's 2 of the 3. And the landscaper, we see if we like what he's done. I mean, the landscape architect is supposed to be a sensitive individual who is going to do the best he can to bring this thing as close to what it should be as possible.
So one thing I might suggest that would be something in between what you're suggesting, Alex, and what I think I've heard April and Denny suggest. We could have the landscape plan itself peer-reviewed, to have another professional opinion. And that could be done for less funds and probably for, in shorter time.
And would that include the topography that you're concerned, that you're right to be concerned about with that?
I would say what we'd want the landscape architect to do would be to walk the site, look at the plan. Does it look like it's generally representative of what's there? The landscape architect wouldn't be able to tell you whether the survey was done with the level of accuracy because they rely on the surveyors too.
That's fraud if you screw up a...
Yeah.
Okay.
But the adequacy of the improvements is, I think, first of all, walking the site, looking at the plan, say this looks generally reasonably accurate, so I can work with this. Then to say, okay, I understand. Walk the site. We would do it with all of the abutters, right, with that landscape architect, and then say, okay, here are the issues that we'd like to make sure are addressed. Does this plan adequately address them? And then if not, what do you recommend would be, or if the plan is totally off and say this plan does nothing that you've asked them to do, then we'd start again, right?
That's acceptable. That's exactly, we just want someone to verify that what's being proposed is right. So, yeah, that's what I want.
Thank you. That's good. Thank you. We got there. Good.
And as far as payment goes, I mean, I wasn't on the warrant committee, but we can certainly get reimbursed before a certificate of occupancy is issued. I don't know that we can spend the money. That's where we'd have to get clarity.
I think, Bill, if you need names of landscape architects, I can help you. But I think it's worth a conversation with one or two and say, here's the situation. What do you think we're looking at in terms of a fee? And then we can talk about how to get it. I mean, if we did want to go to the warrant committee, I guess, and, tap into...
General.
Free cash?
Free cash or general fund or something.
No, there's a term I'm forgetting, but...
In any case, I think we can be sure we can certainly get reimbursed before there's a CO issue. It's part of a condition.
Okay, now, are we going to adjourn or are we going to extend our meeting?
I know for a fact there's someone here from 333 that's been sitting here for 3 hours. So
In Beechwood, too.
That's
Okay.
I'm sorry, that's what I meant.
Okay.
It wasn't. Beechwood
So I'll
is
make
what I
a
meant.
motion to move beyond, or to continue the meeting beyond our 10 o'clock normal.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
I know you're really not ready.
1 second.
I don't know that we could, it is interesting because Beechwood, I think, is relevant to what we're doing here. Because that tree, I suspect that tree has suffered from landscaping. That the roots have, in order to make that nice lawn around it, they have put too much topsoil in, and they basically, the tree is being smothered. That's my read on that situation. Come on up.
So before we finish the 3:30,
We're going to go right back to Brushwood.
okay.
I mean, I don't see that. I don't see that Brushwood
Okay.
was
I was like, wait a minute, I didn't think you said.
anywhere close from being done.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm glad you don't have to wait for additional comments from me.
Yes, thank you.
You might want to stay for the show.
Yeah, I'd just like to start by saying this is going to be a bit of Groundhog's Day for the discussion my name is Quincy Miller, 3 Beechwood Lane, Milton, Massachusetts. I'm representing the homeowners there for Beechwood Lane regarding the situation where the 200-year-old beech tree and the approximately 150-year-old sugar maple was to be protected by the tree management plan. I think I learned at the last meeting that the tree management plan was actually never submitted because he did not pay the person who came to do the tree management plan. And so tree management plan was never done. As we now learn after the fact, there should have been things done around, one of the people who came out said there should have been a fence erected around the drip line to protect all the rooting. None of that was ever completed, nor do, as the homeowner coming in, know that that was something that should have been required, or that none of this was actually held for him. So this came about How we found this issue, for those of you who did not hear the last time, was the trees actually sit on, well, one is in common land directly in my lawn, and the other, the sugar maple, is actually on my property. When the tree did not seem to be growing correctly this year, we called on a arborist to come out and see what was happening. He was the one who initially said he thought both trees were dead. I then reached out to, or my wife did, to the committee looking for a recommendation for another arborist to get a second opinion. At the last meeting, I believe that they were going to order someone to take I think maybe the same person we talked about here, to take a look at the tree. In the meantime, we have also found the homeowners all completely agree that we would like to do everything possible to save those two trees. They were of historical significance, and that's why they were required to be saved for the town. But I'm here to find out what your arborist found in his report, and then where do we go from here?
Well, we don't have any money to pay an arborist, so we asked an arborist to walk by, and the arborist indeed confirmed that there were issues with both trees. But he's not, that's as far as we've got. I'm thinking that, what's his name? Our black oak man?
We don't want to go there.
Woodsy?
You don't want to go there. Largette, Twig.
Twig.
We don't want to go there. Go to the guy go to the second guy on that list. Maltby?
I was going to say Maltby and Company was a name that was recommended to me by another reputable person here within Milton. He's actually coming out tomorrow to take a look at both of those trees.
Look at the grading there, because it really does. I remember that tree was sort of on a little rise, and now it's on a plane.
Well, just to be clear, it is still, from where my house sits, that tree is up on a rise. So it definitely sits higher than the rest of my property. But we will have him look. Again, my concern is the same thing that they're trying to prevent, which is now, as I understand, I don't think we have the bond anymore. I think the bond has been given back to the builder. The builder's now gone.
The bond's still there, right?
The bond was for the roadway.
I care what it was for. Did we give it back to him?
No.
Okay.
Oh, you still do have the bond?
Yes.
Make him sue us.
I don't think we're going to surrender that bond.
I would hope not.
Right away.
So that's...
We have $75,000 still left.
And who makes the decision when we give it back?
It was supposed to be signed off by engineering, but it was supposed to be for the roadway and the sidewalk.
But who? I just want to make
The
sure that
roadway-
we're not discussing with the wrong people.
Well, the roadway is not, the roadway was not put down per engineering standards. The catch basins have an area behind them of about this far. When they put the pavement down, you're supposed to take and move the catch basin back. The pavement guy did not move the catch basins back, therefore there's a gap behind each one of those catch basins. So when it rains, the rain comes down, a lot of the water goes into the catch basin, but a whole lot misses. Goes into the property.
But who would
No, it
sign
goes
the
onto the
release on the
property
bond? Is
across the
that
street.
our town engineer or our building inspector?
Our treasurer has a certified check from,
And who tells that person to release?
it would be me with John Thompson.
Okay, so can we just make sure that doesn't happen?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so there's some dough that it isn't earmarked, but it's there.
It's not going back because the road isn't right.
But even if the road is right, it's not going back.
Fine.
Right, but they don't seem
That's
to
right.
want to. Okay, now, so you're going to get Maltby out, and you're going to say, we want to do whatever we can to save this tree.
Correct. Now, what it takes to save it and who covers the cost for that is the next question. But at the end of the day, we have to save the trees.
Right. And if it can be attributable
roadway.
to the developer.
Common area, which is connected to the
If
roadway.
it could be attributable to the developer, and there are things that the developer should have done to save it, then it seems to me, but you're going to find out first what
Maltby
has to say, and making clear that saving the tree is your objective.
It is a unanimous decision across every member of that community.
Okay, and the arborist that walked through thought there were issues with both trees, and that the sugar maple probably was the least impacted, less impacted.
Correct.
So.
The challenge was the old road went up by that beechwood tree, and so whatever they had to do to take out all of that concrete and stuff along there may have also caused part of the damage to the tree, because it was not that far off.
Probably have the original plans showing the pre-existing conditions, so you'd have some elevations to work with.
Do you have those plans?
I have a set of plans that they had submitted to the town that
Show the existing home? The original home?
The original, I do not have that, no. I just have what the town approved for them, because I guess there were 2 iterations.
And he's coming tomorrow?
This is the tree guy, yes.
We
I might be able to get him the plan tomorrow. I'll see if I have it when I get home
okay.
tonight.
If you have it,
If I have it at home tonight, I'll drop it off at your house tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So after he comes tomorrow, what should be my next steps?
Well, find out what he has to say.
Yeah, I got that.
And we'll see you on...
And then come and see us again on the 28th. And I'll tell you what, we will put you on first.
Yeah.
I can be here on the 28th. Okay.
Early.
Thank you for your patience.
Did you say you are coming on the 28th?
Yes, I can.
Make a note of that.
It's 2 days before my birthday, so hopefully I have good news.
All right, well, good luck. And thank you for working with that
So
tree.
you're going to put
This
them on
is what we were
put them on
hoping
at
that these
7.
Yeah,
Yeah, 7:15.
they're beautiful.
Yes.
other
I mean, they
people would
were.
do.
Look
Okay,
Hopefully we saved some. Okay.
thanks.
Thank you very much.
Back
Thank
to
you.
Brushwood, people. Okay, you all talked out?
Well, no, I mean, it sounds to me like many folks are in agreement that we should have some form of independent review of these plans that are coming
I think that
forward.
sounds like a good...
But can we also make a commitment that by the next meeting, we're going to have identified folks to do that? Because it
I'm,
seems-
happy with the arborist. And as far as getting someone, I think we need a good landscaper who is also an engineer to look at the landscaping plan. Do landscapers ever, are they ever
Yeah, so,
engineers?
well,
Cheryl?
Bowler, who was here last week for... Who did Matt Merver speak for last week?
Yeah.
Well, there are definitely companies that have both disciplines
Yeah, so Bowler
in-house,
is
but
engineering
the
and
same
landscaping.
person, I'm not as familiar with.
Was Pulte? So I was actually going to recommend whoever Pulte's been using, because I thought their team has done an excellent job of submitting good plans and reliable, and they've been very easy to work with, and that happens to coincide. That was Matt Merver.
Why don't
For
I'd look at
example,
Bowler.
remember the comment I made when we talked about Pulte last, where their plan showed a tree like that, when the canopy of that tree is really like that,
Yeah.
and they've got a wall or a road like that. This is the
And
kind of
also-
thing that when they say that 20-inch caliper, what we really need is this, not that little thing right there. That's the graphics I'm talking about, because this is what really needs to be protected. And then we know that road, it doesn't fit. Like their plan, so while I agree with you, they are a professional crew, their plan still had lots of trees that are very close to roadway like that. And that's when I said, come on, guys, be accurate. Let's be realistic about this, because you know those trees aren't going to make it.
So who else would we recommend? Because I think we need to have the name.
For the landscape architect or for the civil?
For the landscape architect.
I'd say Halverson is one. You don't like Halverson?
I love him, but it takes forever.
Copley Wolf.
Copley Wolf's good.
Copper Wolf?
Copley.
Copley Wolf.
Copley Wolf.
All right, well,
I'm happy to look at Halverson, but he's got to make some commitments on time.
I work with Halverson. I can try and use
Copley
influence.
Wolf will do it.
And
Right.
who's,
Madden, Cambridge.
And then what about a surveyor and a drainage person? Are you guys going to decide on people to do that? 'Cause there's 4 people that they need, right?
Well, I would just take that surveyor from Canton, but I leave it up to you guys as to, I think the surveyor is, whoever it is, will be fine, because he's just going to survey, and he's got a license to protect.
Well,
So we should
Bob
insist on an
Hannigan
Alta survey that is stamped, and I agree with Alex. At that point, I mean, if someone stamps an Alta survey,
Well, I mean, Alta doesn't always include topography and existing
then we can
trees.
add
You
with
got to make sure we ask for the topography and the trees.
Right. And then the landscape, the landscape architects, we're going to get the report from their engineer on the drainage, even though some people don't trust their engineer as far as they can be thrown. And any idea who could do that, Bill?
The landscape architect?
No, the drainage.
I'd go to Deb Keller.
Who?
Deb Keller.
Deb Keller? Deb Keller.
she worked on
Woodmere. I think Carberry.
Deb Keller, anyone?
That's fine. I'm happy with her if Northland uses her.
Okay.
so can we contact these folks and make sure they're available? And
You were talking the topography and the trees. You were talking about Dave, the guy from BSC?
Who? Copley Wolf?
No. The engineer. The engineer who
I thought Deb Keller was the engineer.
She's stormwater.
So I was thinking survey.
You were thinking survey. Oh, the surveyor. I mean,
The surveyor actually could do
who is that surveyor in Canton? I mean, I don't.
He could do the engineering too, but
Well, BSC has civil and landscape.
that's the guy I was thinking of, the guy from BSC, the guy who did 1259 Brush Hill.
I'm forgetting his name.
EFC?
Dave.
But I'm working with BSC right now, and I'm working with Monique, forgetting her last name, but she had been with Halverson before.
Okay, and his name's Dave. Okay, these people sound great.
And if they fall through, will Bill be in touch with Alex and we'll get backups?
Well, we first of all need their engineer's report, then we send out our engineer. We need their landscaping plan, and
we just need proposals from these guys, though,
we need
and availability.
We need them to do a survey, and
Them queued up.
Dave Crispin.
Won't be available like
Dave
tomorrow.
Crispin.
that's what I'm thinking.
who?
Dave Crispin.
Oh, he's the one who was on Marion's project.
Crispin.
Crispin.
Crispin. It sounds like a great group of professionals, and the next thing to do is, of course, this is where the rubber meets the road. We're going to tell Pat, oh, and by the way, you're going to pay for these people, and you might get some estimates, and
Well, you can give him an alternative to come back with somebody else that we would have to approve.
Well, that's fine, but I was
So we
going
would
to say,
have to-
the
no, we're
alternative is
not
we
going
can
to
sue
give him
him.
any, we're going to tell him these are the people, and he's got to pay for them, and you,
Yeah, the alternative is he gets shut down up there.
and, well, the alternative is whatever the alternative is.
We'll determine it next
Find
week.
out what but that's what we've determined tonight, right?
But we have to make sure that this happens in time for our next meeting.
It has to what?
Happen before our next meeting, so that we're not having the same conversation again 2 more weeks from now.
Well, presumably they will finish their
So we'll get the bids, and we'll
drainage.
have these guys
Whether or
lined
not
up.
they will, and we can talk about the survey, and we can talk about the landscape plan.
What I was saying is that we're going to line up these consultants, we're going to check their availability, we're going to collect proposals, we're going to deliver those to the developer, and we're going to have the initial conversation about whether or not he's prepared to pay for them.
Right, but that's right. But
I think, if you can get them to turn those around that quickly, I think if you, on the proposal side, it might require them to come look at the site and understand it on the landscape architect side, and I don't know about the civil side.
Good luck.
I know, 2 weeks can be tight because everybody's so busy.
I don't even mean that.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I'm very frustrated, though, Cheryl. And I know earlier you said you weren't comfortable with the tone, and I'm getting emotional, I know, but this isn't the first time we've talked about this. So we're wasting time.
So there's the idea that Bill or Lauren would be calling the consultants that we've suggested and soliciting proposals.
And saying, would you do it? The fee is negotiable.
Okay.
And
availability is paramount.
And if they have to come out, you've got to get Pat to agree to pay what it's going to cost. And if Pat refuses to do it, we're going to not get anything done.
Well, then we know in 2 weeks from now where we stand, and we can have that conversation.
We're going to have the conversation that Pat refuses to do it. And then we're going to say, what should we do now? And
Well, it's better to have it then than to have it in 6 weeks from now, so it's good. What's that?
You got to do the seating if you're still waiting.
well, and the hydro seeding.
Yeah, put the grass down.
Let's say that if it isn't done by next time, we're going to issue an order saying it's got to be done within 1 week.
What has to be done?
The hydro seeding.
Stabilization of the site for the winter.
All right. Are we done with brushwood for the time being?
Are we done? How are you?
Yeah. Yes, thank you for giving it so much attention. I look forward to seeing if he complies with this next round of requirements that you're so patiently giving him. So I will be at the next meeting and eager to see what has transpired. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Won't we all?
No.
Okay, now, I think that we're done.
Well, actually, at the last meeting, I asked for a report on 1 Kinsale.
On what?
On 1 Kinsale Lane.
1 Kinsale.
Oh, but it's not on the agenda, but you saw the letter I sent.
Yeah, no, I didn't see the letter you sent.
I sent a letter. Do you have a copy, Bill, by the way, on Kinsale?
We got a letter from Bill, right?
Right, that says...
No, I sent a letter saying that...
Did you see Alex's letter to Joe Prondak?
I don't think so.
Well, okay, Bill will get it to you. I didn't circulate it to the board because I don't... That's not the way you do things, but Bill can send you the letter that I sent to the building commissioner saying the owner of the existing house gave away his frontage. He no longer has frontage, therefore the existing house is a house without frontage and it's not grandfathered. And I said, since it isn't a legal building lot, a building permit can't be issued for it. Did Mr. Prondak agree?
He did.
And we know that the owner wants to do something to his garage in the not too distant future, and I think that we can anticipate that Kinsale Lane will be completed.
Well, I'd be remiss if I didn't say how disappointed I am in this project, too.
What?
I said I would be remiss if I didn't express how disappointed I am in this project, too. And in this instance,
Except for Kinsale Lane, looks quite nice.
it looks nice, but it's not complete, and they have an occupancy permit, and we've given all of our authority away.
No, we haven't, because they don't have any frontage.
Yes, but what can we do about that today?
Well, I mean,
Unless
if
they
you
try to
don't
do
have,
something
if the
new.
building is, presumably you could say you've got to remove your building.
I don't see that.
You and I had this discussion yesterday.
Yeah.
There was a water permit that was submitted. There was a fee and there was a deposit, and that was to bring the water line from Walcott to the hydrant at the turn in Kinsale. There are two sets of plans, the first set and the second set, and it's the second set that makes the requirement of the water line go to the hydrant at the top of the hill.
The second
It's
hydrant.
in the plans.
It's in
Those
both
plans have been
plans.
stamped, they've been signed, they've been recorded, and that's the part that hasn't been completed. The part with the road is in the first part, in the first set of plans. Those have been recorded. So engineering didn't see the second set, they only saw the first set, so they know the road is there, they know the thing comes around the corner.
What comes
John
around the
Thompson
corner?
and Chase Berkeley had the discussion today with Dennis on how he's going to do this, when he's going to do this. I submitted all of the plans and all of the decisions by this board to Chase this afternoon so that he knows what it is that he's being required to do. There was a meeting this morning, yesterday, that was between Ned Corcoran and Chase about the water line going from Brush Hill Road to the fire hydrant that Dennis has to connect to on the upper road for 1065. When Dennis takes and goes from Kinsale to the upper road and Juliet Turner connects from that hydrant down to Brush Hill, there'll be a complete loop with brand new 8-inch line.
That's if she.
That's fine. There is a line there now. She would be updating the line. Dennis is going to have to take and put the 8-inch in before he can do any work to his garage. He can't get a building permit for his garage until he puts in the pavers and until he puts in that water line.
Do we have any idea how motivated he is to update his garage?
He's asking for the permit. He's not getting his permit right now.
I think that that's a perfectly satisfactory. I mean, it's not a perfect situation, but it's a satisfactory situation. I think that we need to concentrate on brushwood. If we could make brushwood as satisfactory as that, I'd be reasonably happy.
But I can understand, April brought this up over a year ago, probably a year and a half ago.
May 12th, 2016. And that's not the response that I got from you, Bill. You can go watch the video. When I said, how is an occupancy permit issued? You said, I don't know, it shouldn't have been, because the subdivision isn't complete. So my concern here, and the reason why I'm so upset about it, is I'm questioning every permit now.
I'm not sure that an occupancy permit.
You told us at that meeting it was signed off and that the deed was...
No, I mean, he didn't get an occupancy permit for his own house.
Exactly.
He got an occupancy permit for the house that was sold.
One Kinsale. Everything
So
on one
he doesn't
Kinsale got
have-
done. Everything on
Dennis
his own
doesn't have
house.
He doesn't have an
He's
occupancy
been
permit?
living in his house before he did the subdivision.
So he didn't get an updated occupancy permit after the work.
But we heard tonight that the Beechwood project didn't have the necessary filings either, apparently. And I don't know if what this gentleman said tonight was accurate, Quincy Miller, but he said the landscape plan for that project wasn't submitted either.
Yeah, I think the board. I would like to have Michael Dennehy come in and have a chat with the board about what we're going to do about, process going forward. Because I just don't know how we continue to issue conditional permits and have any confidence that they're going to be honored until we have some process put in place. And I think the first step is to have Michael Dennehy come in and hear what our concerns are.
I fully agree with that, and I hope he does. And I would be interested also just to have a discussion about process, just overall, this as an example. There's other projects as an example. So to go over the process.
Michael's the right guy to do that with because he's the CEO of the town now, and we don't have any enforcement power.
And also,
We've never had any enforcement power.
right.
We never have, exactly.
So
We make the rules, but we can't enforce
The
them.
enforcement power remains
Right.
with the building commissioner,
I know, but I think
who
they've
now
already-
has some additional help, but he was alone on the job for a long time. I mean, I fully understand that he can't be around while people stake every tree.
Well, I'd like to have actually some reporting. So let's have how many special permits are out there that are active, what's the status of them? I mean, and when was the last time that the building department was on site and checked for compliance with the things that the planning board puts in? So in other words, it's the special permit requirements, not the building code requirements. So let's get a monthly report.
Well, also, this is something I have a whole bunch of notes I've been taking at every meeting since I started 4 months ago, just process. People have mentioned process checklist, but I'd love the process checklist to be transparent for the public so they understand where this development is at in process, so that they know they're prepared for the meeting. They know what areas.
And the person to ask for all of this is Michael Dennehy, because he's
exactly.
the only one that can make it happen.
And I mean, I think that with our expertise, we can make recommendations.
We can
I
make
mean, there's
recommendations, but it
plenty of
should all go
platforms that
through
can do
Michael
that.
Dennehy.
I agree. And
But we could prepare a checklist.
Absolutely.
And
I mean, we should be doing permit
but
tracking,
do we
so
have
we know
any
where things are
volunteers
at all
to
times.
prepare a draft checklist?
I don't know. I mean, April, I'd be interested in seeing it, having you tell me where you got that book, but
I commissioned the study from the Mass Association when I worked for the state. It's 10 years old, but it's still completely applicable. I use it for all my municipal clients.
But this is, I mean, if we're going to, Mr. Ayuti has suggested that a checklist is what they do in
is that something
Duxbury.
that we could ask
And
Lauren?
we might ask Duxbury if they have
Permitting flow
such a
charts and
thing.
checklists, number 3.
Right.
There's a
So
whole
that's my
bunch of
question.
samples.
So could we ask Lauren or Bill, whichever, I mean, we can't direct the department, but could one of them put together a draft checklist for this board to review and have a process review? Because I don't have time to do it.
I mean, I'm more than equipped and capable of helping with that. I think there's a number of things that have come out through this
Well, I
last
think
few months
Lauren
that we
is,
can
it
suggest.
sounds like it might be down your alley, come to think of it.
First special project from the planning board.
And
Can she borrow your book?
Yes, this is literally the only hard copy left in the Commonwealth, so if you lose it, I will kill you. That is
all
on
right, now
record. Yes.
let's cut to the chase here. It's 10:30.
A motion to adjourn, please, so I can get home.
Second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Thank you.